This man fell asleep reading a fantasy novel and woke up transmigrated into a side character's body. This character is the useless son of a very rich family. Then he remembered the only scene this character appeared in was him getting beaten to death by the main character. With the novel knowledge in hand, his plan is to simply do nothing, stay away from the main character. But somehow the main character still managed to find him. This story started with Rok Soo, our protagonist, who fell asleep while reading a novel and woke up inside the story as a character. He originally thought about just going with the flow and enjoying life. But then he suddenly remembered that the hero was going to beat him up severely. He checked his body and found no scars yet, meaning the timeline had not yet reached that encounter with the hero. Cale is the eldest son of Count Henituse. He gets into a drunken brawl with the hero and ends up with a scar on his ribs. After that incident, he could not remember the rest of Cale's plot. He should have been an overpowered protagonist holding the script. But unfortunately, he only read half of the novel. Meanwhile, the hero Choi Han encounters great opportunities and gradually grows into a true hero. To avoid getting beaten up, he decided to follow the rest of the novel's plot closely. Suddenly, he heard someone calling out to him from outside the door. He quickly put on his clothes and headed outside. Before him stood an elegant old man holding tea. This was Leon, a professional assassin once from the Eastern continent. Cale quickly took the teacup and thought to himself, in this continent on the verge of war, he needed enough self-preservation strength. Yet he could not become too strong, or it would draw unwanted attention. He felt that his current appearance was not bad. The only problem was his terrible reputation. Servants would tremble in fear just seeing him. He was a typical minor scoundrel. Arriving at the Count's dining hall, Cale saw his family waiting before him. There was his father, Count Henituse. His stepmother was also there, along with his younger brother Basin, and his youngest brother Lily. He sat down, thinking that Cale had neither real ability nor power, relying entirely on his wealthy father. His stepmother and younger brothers usually avoided him as well. This life was amazing. Except the family looked at him with a hint of fear. So he just wanted to finish eating and leave, without causing any trouble for them. But because the sausage tasted much better than modern ones, he unconsciously smiled. Seeing Cale smile, Basin was terrified and quickly apologized. Cale took a few thirsty gulps of red wine. The Count was just about to say the wine tasted like shit as usual. Unexpectedly, Cale said it tasted pretty good, leaving the Count looking stunned. The Count waved his hand and told him to eat more if he liked it. Cale thought to himself, playing the villain meant nobody would dare mess with him. He would just be nice to Basin. So Basin could inherit the territory without needing to use his brain, leaving him free to be a wealthy slacker lord, or hide away deep in the mountains if things went south. At this moment, the Count asked Cale if there was anything he wanted recently. Then turning to speak, he immediately agreed with the Count. All right, then I'll give you a bit more. But when he saw the numbers, he was shocked. It turned out this family wasn't just well off, they were actually super rich. It looks like I'll have to change my plans and head to Winston. Cale went to a tea house and walked inside alone. The crowd suddenly went quiet when they saw Cale. The owner came to welcome him. This man was a bastard son named Billows. Cale asked Billows to bring some tea. Billows was shocked. This tip was way too much. Cale looked at him with a puzzled expression. I have plenty of money, so just consider it a tip. He sat down in a seat by the window. In the original novel, Choi Han would come to the Lord City today to report the massacre of his village. Cale remembered his encounter with Choi Han in the novel. Cale pointed at Choi Han and shouted, "The wine I drink is worth more than the lives of ants like you." Choi Han was enraged by Cale's words. What followed was a severe beating. Coming back to his senses, Cale felt a shiver of fear. He hugged himself. This scene was just too terrifying. He saw someone approaching. It was the novel's protagonist, Choi Han. He was stopped by the guards. Cale guessed they were asking him to show his identification. But how could he possibly have something like that? As expected, he was turned away. However, he would return tonight. He would happen to run into a drunken Cale. Cale got up and headed downstairs. He asked the owner to save him a seat. He could hear people in the shop gossiping. They were surprised that Cale hadn't smashed anything. To deal with those powerful individuals, he needed his own strength. He suddenly stopped in his tracks. The novel had mentioned that among the ancient power, there was a magic shield similar to a mage's protective barrier. To obtain the indestructible shield, he needed some bait first. Cale raised his hand and pointed to the bread. He threw down the money. Seeing the owner hesitate, he spoke up. "If you do not want to sell, I will go somewhere else." The owner snapped out of it and quickly packed it up for him. With the bread in hand, Cale headed up the mountain. Along the way, two people started tailing him. Arriving at the top, he reached out and pushed open the dilapidated door. A massive tree that had stood for hundreds of years came into view. Suddenly, a child behind him shouted at him not to go near that tree. The child warned that the tree ate people. Cale chuckled, saying that was exactly what he was looking for. Long ago, A person who served the gods was driven out for being a glutton. Driven by intense obsession, a tree grew from the ground after their death. This place concentrated that person's resentment and power. It was also the indestructible shield he was looking for. Just as Cale was about to make his move, the two children behind him kept trying to persuade him otherwise. Their noise was driving him crazy. The two children were worried the tree would eat him and that he would die. Cale threw them 2 bags of bread and told them to get going. The red-haired child picked up the bread, but the gray-haired one kept trying to warn him. Cale's expression turned sinister. "Haven't you heard of the thug, Cale?" The two of them were startled. They turned around and shouted, "Don't die," before leaving. Cale took some bread and held it to the opening. The bread was sucked in and vanished. According to the novel, he had to keep feeding it until the blackness at the opening completely disappeared. So he took the entire bag of bread and dumped it all in. After that, Cale sighed. Just how deep is your resentment? The blackness hasn't faded one bit. Turning around, he saw the 2 little ones munching on the bread. Worried they might curiously approach the tree, he told them, "If you want more bread tomorrow, stay away from that tree." After leaving the tea house, Cale went to a tavern. An old man arrived. The owner hurried to get him some wine. Seeing him approach, the others looked terrified. He took the drink handed over by the boss and left the tavern right after. He drank as he walked along the road and followed the city wall until he reached a corner. Peering around it, he found it was just like the novel described. When Choi Han jumped down from the city wall, there happened to be 2 little kittens right below him. To avoid stepping on them, he chose to twist his own ankle instead. This novel really loves its forced coincidences. The protagonist truly is a good-hearted guy. Noticing movement nearby, Choi Han glanced over at Cale, making Cale heart pound with anxiety. Good thing he had a bit of alcohol in him to steady his nerves. He needed to leave a good impression. He cleared his throat and opened the bag, saying, "You must be starving. Eat up, poor little things." Realizing the kittens were too small, he tore the meat into smaller pieces and petted them, telling them to eat quickly and get better. "What poor little creatures. Do you have a place to go?" Cale looked at Choi Han. "Somewhere to sleep." "Are you hungry? Are you going to answer?" Cale stood up and walked over to him, softly saying, "Then come with me." Cale thought that to leave the best impression, he had to win over Choi Han's stomach. He didn't want to get beaten up by the novel's male lead. He realized he actually had to proactively win over the male lead. Choi Han stumbled along behind Cale. Suddenly, a cat ran up to his feet and acted spoiled. Cale thought, "You're cute, but I don't like cats." Noticing the male lead looking back at him, Cale decided he had to appear compassionate. Cale petted the cat, saying, "You seem to really like me, but I have to go. See you next time, little cutie." When they returned home, Leon greeted Cale warmly, but he noticed the atmosphere had become a bit strange. As they entered, they ran into the vice butler, Hans. Hans was puzzled. This was the first time the young master had walked home by himself after drinking. Cale holding the bottle of alcohol made Hans step back 100 meters in shock. "Why are you running so far away?" Cale asked with an awkward expression on Hans' face. According to the novel plot, there is someone else he needs to meet. That is Ron's son, Crox. He is also a terrifying fellow. In the novel, Crox decides to follow the main character after seeing him beat someone up, now bringing him to Choi Han. Will Crox leave with his father later on? Cale puts his hand on Choi Han's shoulder, asking Crox to make something for him to eat. Crox picks up a knife with great reluctance, asking Cale what he just said. Cale calmly composes himself. "Put the knife down and speak properly. Just make some food for this guest." Crox sighs. "Understood, young master." Cale thinks to himself that this is going to be bad. I have finally gotten them tangled up together. Then he opened the door and prepared to go back to his room to rest. Billows quickly followed and asked Cale what they should do with the guest he brought back. Cale told Hans to handle it however he saw fit and turned to leave. Inside the count room, Hans reported Cale's activities for the day to the count. He got drunk. Then he instructed him to keep watching and report back at any time. "What on earth is going on with my son? Why has he suddenly changed? His behavior is clearly so different from before." The count also ordered Hans to look into the background of the illegitimate son of the Harris family. He always felt the atmosphere was very strange. Let it go for now. Leon came to Cale's room carrying a cup of lemon tea. He asked Cale how he slept last night. Cale noticed Leon's neck and asked if he was injured. Leon handed him the tea and asked if he was worried about him, adding that it was nothing, just a scratch from a little cat. Cale thought to himself while drinking tea. A cat, or rather some innocent person. Cale walked toward the door, saying others will handle it for me, so you do not need to bother. Just as he was about to open the room, Leon called out to him again. "How does this lemonade taste?" Cale felt creeped out by the way he was staring. "It tastes great." He found the whole thing completely baffling. Leon turned his head and didn't say anything. For a moment, the two of them just stared at each other in silence. Once Cale snapped out of it, he immediately slammed the door shut. Holy crap. You scared the life out of me. Cale clutched his chest. Looking annoyed, Leon explained. The door opened too quickly. I told the guest to wait in the room, but he insisted on standing outside to see you. Cale thought to himself. He opened the door again. What is it? The guest was standing there, motionless. Choi Han whispered something softly. The meal money. Cale started to feel uneasy. Choi Han leaned in with a sincere expression. I'll pay you back for the meal. Cale thought. How could I possibly charge you? Are you tired of living? As for that matter, about that matter. Cale shrugged his shoulders. About the village slaughter. He told Choi Han to go find assistant manager Hans, since general problems could be solved there. Then he patted Leon and told him to try his best to help out as well. It was unbelievable that he was willing to help even without knowing who he was. Cale felt that helping someone weaker needed no special reason. If it really could not be resolved, Hans would naturally refuse. Thinking about that. Cale. Leon muttered quietly that it was quite interesting. This fearless little punk used to be so timid. The little guy seemed to be afraid. Could it be that he knows something? Choi Han interrupted Leon's thoughts, asking him to lead the way, thinking that this guy was reeking of blood. Yet he's acting all innocent here. Follow me. This man is Cale. He's preparing to do something big. Specifically, he's trying to win over the novel's protagonist, Choi Han, to avoid getting beaten up by him. Cale even brought Choi Han to his home. Continuing from the last episode, Cale returned to that cursed tree. He poured all the bread into the hole. He heard a voice from inside the hole shouting, I want more. Cale thought to himself, you've got quite an appetite. His father, the Count, had asked him to come to the study that evening, so he needed to get back soon. As he was leaving, he noticed two little ones eating bread by the door. However, the gray-haired one was covered in scars. Cale had already bought out all the bread from the local bakery, and just as he was wondering where else to find some, someone suddenly called out to him. An auntie told him she had plenty of bread at home. Cale simply threw gold coins at her. He told her he'd buy all her bread. The auntie quickly packed it up, and Cale told her to make sure it was packed well. Cale told the woman to make extra, and when a neighbor saw and said they could bake too, Cale immediately paid them to make a large bag first. I will come pick it up next time. Afterward, Cale went and ordered bread from many other shops. B. Crocs was watching in secret. Seeing Cale buying all that bread, he simply thought Cale must have lost his mind. Noticing how much Cale had changed from before, he became extremely curious. Returning to the mountain, Cale brought a bottle of medicine for the gray-haired person, telling them to leave this place safely. Then he started throwing bread into the tree hole again. After throwing so much bread, the color at the mouth of the hole finally began to fade. Cale turned around and did not see the two little ones, but instead heard two little cats meowing. Are these not the two cats I met before? Have they latched onto me? Did they come to pester me? I had better leave quickly. Back at the Count estate, Count Henituse asked Cale to represent the family and make a trip to the royal family, which was hosting a banquet. This royal event corresponds to the Plaza attack incident from the novel. The one who eventually stopped the mysterious attack was the protagonist, Choi Han. Choi Han even formed a friendship with the crown prince because of it. With my current abilities, things like this were always left to my younger brother, Basin. Why not just let him go this time? Why on earth send a useless person like me? The Count just smiled and told him to get ready, as they would be leaving in 5 days. Cale felt it was too rushed and asked for some time to think about it. After they left, Basin told Cale that only his older brother was suitable for such an event. Cale thought, they're trying to make me the heir. I just want to be a rich, lazy slacker. Why is that so hard? But since I've read the novel, I know that if I let my brother go, if he happens to get killed, I'll have a much better chance of achieving my goal. Hans was about to report on Choi Han's progress, but Cale told him to call Choi Han over and tell him it's time to pay for his meals. To make my life more comfortable, it's time I made good use of him. Like many protagonists, Cale accidentally transmigrated into a novel. However, he fell asleep after reading only half of it. To survive smoothly, he was determined to make the male lead his own man. Choi Han, having been summoned, saw there was nobody else in the room, and directly asked Cale what task he needed to do to pay back for the meal. Thinking that the plot had already deviated from the original storyline, Cale decided to prepare in advance. He asked Choi Han if he knew how to protect people. Choi Han was puzzled and asked what Cale meant. Cale intended to have him protect someone. The tragedy of the slaughtered village seemed to weigh heavily on Choi Han, though he was not entirely certain he could do it. He replied that to protect someone, even if difficult, he would surely try his best. Choi Han felt Cale was right. and that he needed to give it a real try. Cale asks him a question. What is your name? Choi-han asks in surprise. Cale stands up. I only heard about it from others before. I want to hear you say it yourself. He reaches out his hand and says happily, My name is Choi-han. Cale shakes his hand. Great, my name is Cale Henituse. It turns out to be just a self-introduction. Choi-han looks at the names on the paper and speaks. One is named Claire and the other is Rocco. In the novel, Claire is a princess of a neighboring country. She has survived numerous attacks from assassins. Rocco is the heir of the wolf tribe and the last survivor of the blue wolves. He looks very gentle on the surface. But once he unleashes the berserk state of the wolf tribe, he becomes extremely cruel. Claire also possesses terrifying destructive power. She is a character second only to Choi-han. She wants to build the finest magic tower on the continent, and will eventually become a hero figure. Cale takes out a map and tells Choi-han to set out with him first. They will head to a specific place. That is because another villain is about to appear during this period. Later on, he will target the prince everywhere. And this guy also controls a dragon. That 5-year-old young dragon suffered long-term abuse by humans and went completely berserk after escaping. In the end, it was Choi-han who showed up and gave it release. The problem is that the Mad Dragon's village is precisely on Cale's mandatory route. So by then, they will either have to let Choi-han eliminate it or set it free before it goes crazy, which would not be bad either. Cale continues speaking. After saving people, bring them to the capital together. Consider this task as payment for your meals. He finally instructs Hans that no matter what happens, you must come to the capital. Choi-han nodded and promised Cale that he could definitely do it. Before leaving, Cale also told him that this was a secret between the two of them, and that he must not tell anyone else. Choi-han responded to Cale with a light smile. Before returning to his room, Cale asked his father, the Count, for some more money. While Cale was lying in bed feeling happy, Leon entered his room with some water. He placed the water on the table. My son, Crocs, prepared this especially for you. I hope you have sweet dreams. As someone who stays by the young master's side. After saying that, Leon left the room. Cale sat up and thought to himself, that old man, does he really need to stay by my side? He scared me. I'm going to leave with you too, and Choi-han. The next morning, Cale prepared to go buy bread. As he walked, he thought about what had happened just now. Thinking back, he realized he was quite good at hunting rabbits. To hunt rabbits effectively, one must first observe them closely, then slaughter it, and take out the internal organs. Cale arrived at the shop to pick up the bread. The owner asked regretfully if this was really his last day. Cale joked with him, and then patted him on the shoulder. Do not worry, I will come find you next time I want to eat some. The two little ones were waiting for Cale. Seeing this, Cale walked over and handed the food over. The two little ones happily took it. Soon, Cale walked over to the tree. He poured the bag of bread into the hole. A voice came from inside. Give me a bit more, I am begging you. Seeing this, Cale quickly threw more inside. Suddenly, the big tree began to shake violently and make strange noises. If you give me a bit more to eat, I will give you a gift. Hearing about the gift, Cale's eyes widened. He then poured the last bag of bread inside. As it gradually disappeared, the black hole suddenly began to emit a white light. It kept repeating that it tasted delicious. The light continued to rise. Great, this is great. Cale thought the ancient tree's regret was more like it had died before it could finish talking. After listening to the ancient tree's complaints, it decided that Cale was a decent kid. So, it entered Cale's heart directly. This warm and fresh power was the indestructible shield. It vowed to protect Cale with its own life until his heart stopped beating. Cale felt his heartbeat change. He recalled the contents of the novel. A shield materialized in front of him with a popping sound. This was the indestructible shield brought into physical form. Now that he had the indestructible shield, even if someone attacked him, he could at least block it twice. The power of the shield originated from the heart. If he could make his heart stronger, the indestructible shield would grow stronger as well. He would have to find a way to strengthen it during this trip to the capital. On the way back, walking toward the city wall, Cale ran into those two little kittens again. The two kittens were thoroughly soaked by the rain, letting out pitiful cries. Seeing that Cale had no reaction, the two little ones crept up to his feet and began rubbing against him. Finally, Cale brought them back home and handed them over to Hans. Hans held both of them and gushed over how cute they were. He asked Cale to leave the two little kittens in his care. Cale agreed, then turned and pointed at the pair. As long as you feed them, they will stay quiet. Besides, the two of them are brother and sister. The kittens froze upon hearing Cale's words. Cale smiled and said, Did you really think I wouldn't guess it? The two of you have the exact same colors as your human forms. Even an idiot could figure that out. Cale walked closer to them. We will chat more later. Cale took off his wet clothes and asked Hans why he had not seen Leon. Hans picked up a kitten and replied that Leon, Choi Han, and B. Crocs had gone out together to buy travel supplies. Cale smiled to himself, thinking, the relationship between those three is coming along nicely. That way, I can get some relief soon. Then Hans added something that immediately wiped the smile off his face. Those three were so excited at the thought of serving you. Billows would soon follow the male lead as well. Although he is a greedy man, his greed is actually quite down to earth. Cale doesn't hate him. In fact, he actually admires him a bit. Billows suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Young master, I heard you're heading to the capital. Cale confirmed that he was. Billows became interested. I happen to be heading there as well. So perhaps I could accompany you. You seem to have changed recently. You're completely different from your old reputation. Cale took a sip of tea. Which one are you talking about? The thug Cale? Billows continued. Exactly. You used to be a total delinquent, didn't you, young master? Cale curled his lips into a smile. You've never dared to tell anyone who your father is, have you? You're the same. Are you really content being an illegitimate child forever? Can you really be satisfied with a life where you can't hold your head high? Cale turned to look toward the stairs and continued speaking. If I start counting from when I was 8 years old, I have been acting like a punk for over 10 years. Tell me, Billows, do you not get tired of doing this for 10 years? You cannot possibly want to live as a punk for the rest of your life. Do you not think so too? Hearing Cale's words, Billows could not hold it in anymore and burst out laughing. After laughing, Billows dropped his disguise. You are right, I am indeed sick of it. AD. Glaring angrily at Leon. If you are going to drink, drink quietly. He was supposed to be the protagonist who held the script, only to fall asleep halfway through reading the novel. When he woke up, he had become a handsome cannon fodder character in the story. To avoid becoming mere experience points for the main character to level up, he actually planned to make the main character his own person. Picking up from the previous episode, smugness filled the air. Sure enough, Billows was just as he had expected. Billows stands up, smiling and suggesting they meet again in the capital. Cale waves him off and thinks to himself, the person you really should be meeting is not me. You are the one who is supposed to follow Choi Han in the future. Watching the two of them pass each other by, Cale feels extremely satisfied. This lines everything up with the original story. After sitting back down, Leon curiously asks Cale if he is very close with the shop owner. Hearing Cale deny it, Leon looks out the window downstairs and excitedly says, it turns out the rumors really cannot be trusted. The words of these two leave Cale feeling baffled. Soon, Billows brings over 2 cups of tea. Cale wears a mischievous grin and points out the lemon tea. Especially for you, Leon. I figured this must be your absolute favorite. Leon gives Cale an annoyed look, picks up the tea, and slams the cup back down hard on the table after finishing it. Leon grows even more curious about what is going on. Ever since their previous clash, B. Crocs had constantly been looking to duel Choi Han. Yet this man radiating a bloody aura had just said he would protect others from now on. Hearing what Cale said, that the tea was good, he stared at the two of them with a complex expression. What kind of relationship was this? This really is the best tasting tea. Choi Han also agreed it was delicious. Only Leon was left speechless. Leon thought back to his childhood. When the Countess passed away, he would run over to comfort his father. Even when returning home dead, drunk every time, he never once lost his temper at his family. And just like that, he had watched him grow up. After the rain stopped outside, the group quickly returned to the house. The 2 little ones had already been cleaned up nicely. Cale thought to himself. He originally wanted to let him see them since he liked small animals so much. But Cale insisted on going back to his room first just now. He was already so strong. What else was he trying to do? Cale prepared to take a bath and asked Leon to look after the 2 little ones. Leon muttered that they turned out to be children of the cat tribe, the gray trait being fog, and the red one being poison. Their hearing was also quite sensitive. With proper training, they could definitely come in handy. Leon reached out his hand, thinking that before parting ways, he would give the young master a gift. In the next episode preview, stop meowing like cats and start speaking human words. I am not full, I want to eat meat. I want to eat cake. After taking a bath, Cale asks the 2 little ones if they plan to follow him from now on. The 2 little ones immediately run to Cale's feet to show affection. Cale agrees to let them follow, as long as they earn their own meal money, and they meow happily. Cale tells them to speak human words. The sister grabs Cale and says she is not full and wants meat. The brother wants cake. Cale smiles and says, they can eat whatever they want, but they have to work hard for it. What little foodies. 4 days later, at the Count's dining hall, Cale asks why there are so many people accompanying them since they are leaving today. Didn't he tell them not to bring too many servants? His father clears his throat and stays silent. Cale's stepmother speaks up, saying it was her decision. If they take too few servants, what would happen if other families look down on their household? These nobles care a lot about appearances. That is when Cale thinks of the original story. She grew up in an impoverished baron's family. To change her difficult situation, she thought about selling luxury goods to nobles and came to Henituse. Because of her fascination with sculpture, she met and fell in love with Count Henituse. Now she is already a core figure in the cultural affairs of the territory. Regarding the family's strength, most people felt that making a grand show was tied to family power. Cale thought to himself, I even have people helping me change clothes now. Having more attendants is definitely better. However, there is a crazy dragon waiting for me on the road. I certainly do not want any casualties right in front of me. Cale put down his wine glass and said, Art is the clear mirror in our hearts. And it is what the sculptor's eyes see. One must carve out what is inside the heart. I saw these words in the exhibition hall. Cale thought to himself, that was carved personally by my stepmother Violin. Stepmother replied, decide on your entourage yourself. All right, everything used must be of high quality. Cale agreed and even told her that everything should be done in a generous amount. The Countess actually smiled. Count Father then asked Cale if he had looked at the intelligence report regarding the young nobles. Cale fluently recounted the personalities of a bunch of people. Count Father was surprised that he had actually read such things. He then brought up some strange rumors he heard recently. I heard that man-eating tree on the mountain has changed, and grass is actually growing around it now. Nothing used to grow there before. Cale thought to himself, then pretended to be calm and said, that is quite interesting. The Count reminded him that while things were fine in the territory, he must remember that words can be dangerous. The most terrifying thing in the world is the mouth of a calculating person. Cale understood his father's intention and replied seriously, I'll keep that in mind. After finishing the meal, Cale thought he should hurry to the capital. Once he settled everything, he could return and enjoy his lazy days. His parents reminded him to be safe on the road and to return as soon as possible. After that, Cale turned to look at his two younger brothers. Basin bowed to Cale. The third brother, however, just stood there. After hesitating for a long time, he said, safe travels. Cale told his brother to take care of himself as well. The brother shyly looked away. After saying goodbye, Cale left the estate and opened the carriage door, only to look surprised. What was going on now? Next episode preview. Choi Han wants to share a carriage with Cale. Cale thinks he's overreacting a bit. Choi Han nodded disappointedly. Cale looked shocked after opening the carriage. Hans is smitten as he looks at the two little ones. Cale asks Hans why their seats are more luxurious than his own. Hans explains that the two kittens are both adorable and delicate, so he wants to make their journey comfortable. Cale thinks to himself that if this cat lover knew they could create fog and spit poison, he would be terrified out of his mind. Just as Cale is about to board the carriage, he is called over by Choi Han. Choi Han wants to share a carriage with him, but Cale feels there is no need for that. Choi Han nods with a hint of disappointment. His demeanor makes Cale feel somewhat strange. The present Choi Han is different from how he was written in the novel, looking completely devoid of despair. Will making so many changes end up affecting the future plot of the story? Seeing the vice captain provoking Choi Han, Cale can only think that idiots like this are everywhere. Before long, this guy is going to regret everything he is doing today. The vice captain walks up to Cale's carriage and obsequiously asks if they are ready to depart. Cale suddenly slams the door shut and gives the order to move out, giving the vice captain a terrible scare. After a long while, the convoy has left the town and entered the forest. Cale looks out the window, intending to prepare some gifts once they reach the capital. When saying goodbye to his younger brother earlier, Cale had asked if they wanted any gifts, and his third brother had looked quite expectant, asking Cale to buy him a sword. Cale was a bit surprised. You are only 7, why do you need a sword? His second brother explained that the youngest dreamed of becoming a swordsman. Cale thought that given their family's slender builds, swordsmanship might actually suit them well, so he promised to buy him an expensive one. That made his youngest brother ecstatic. Cale then asked his second brother what he wanted. The second brother asked for a fountain pen instead. Suddenly, the carriage came to a sharp halt. Everyone inside was startled. Cale asked why they had stopped outside. A group of bandits had suddenly rushed out in front of the carriage. The leader shouted for the men to stand on the left, and the women on the right. If they wanted to live, they had to leave all their money behind. Cale thought these people were truly foolish. Did they not see the family crest on the carriage? The two little ones figured these people must be total novices. Leon approached the carriage and said there were many rabbits around here, suggesting they take a break before continuing their journey. Looking at Leon's smiling face, Cale felt he was far more terrifying than the bandits. They were about to reach the village attacked by the black dragon. Night fell. Cale clenched his fists in frustration. Dinner turned out to be rabbit meat soup. Of all things Choi Han could have caught, he had to bring back rabbits. Cale heard people talking nearby. They were likely discussing Choi Han's strength. Today, Choi Han had cut down dozens of bandits in one go. He was obviously the star of the show, and seeing him wipe them out so quickly had even given the vice captain a fright. Leon interrupted his thoughts and asked why he wasn't eating. Cale claimed he didn't have much of an appetite, thinking, "This old man is just teasing me again." Choi Han worriedly asked if his stomach was bothering him. Cale said he was fine, though he was actually just disgusted by the rabbit meat. Choi Han looked at Cale thoughtfully and suddenly called his name. Cale waved them off, telling them to hurry back. Choi Han nodded and said he'd go right away. Cale felt his reaction was a bit strange. Seeing Cale wasn't eating, Choi Han asked if this was his first time experiencing something like this. Cale admitted it was, as he'd never seen so many bandits before. Choi Han nodded and said, "I think this must be the first time you felt like your life was hanging by a thread." Cale gave a bitter smile, thinking that since meeting Choi Han, he'd lost count of how many times he'd felt that way. He looked at Leon and B-Crocs, wondering why he was surrounded by such terrifying people. Choi Han stood up and walked toward Cale. Choi Han said with a serious face that the first time is always the hardest to endure. He asked Cale why he refused to practice martial arts, pointing out that training at least gives someone the ability to protect themselves. Cale looked around at everyone and replied to Choi Han, "Do I not have plenty of people protecting me already?" Then, he smiled and patted his own chest, saying he trusted this heart would never stop, thinking to himself that his heart was guarded by the indestructible shield. Yet from Choi Han's perspective, Cale not only struggled to eat, but also had an extremely frail physique. Looking at Cale, Choi Han seemed to think of something, and turned around to announce that he was going to practice his swordsmanship, determined to make himself much stronger. Cale only found Choi Han terrifying, wondering if getting stronger meant he wanted to conquer the world. Triggered by Choi Han's intense drive, the vice captain suddenly called everyone out for night training. There were only 3 days left until the Black Dragon went berserk. This place belonged to the Viscount, whose villa was located at the foot of the village mountain, and the Black Dragon was locked in a cave right behind the villa. The Viscount was a lackey of Marquis Stan, and none of these people were any good. Vinian, the second son of Marquis Stan, had even crippled his own older brother just to secure the succession. If he did not constantly abuse the Black Dragon, the dragon would never have lost control. Thinking about all this, Cale let out a sigh. While Hans assumed that Cale must be exhausted, he planned to go with Choi Han to find an inn so everyone could rest. Cale watched the two of them talking outside for a long time without moving. Then he called out to Choi Han. Cale waved his hand and told him to hurry back. Choi Han nodded and said he would go right away. Cale felt that his reaction was a bit strange. Could it not be strange, Cale? You have already tamed the male lead like a little puppy. At that moment a carriage suddenly sped over. Right in front was an elderly person with difficulty walking. Seeing this, Choi Han sprinted quickly toward the elder, and then lunged forward to shield them. The carriage dashed past, and fortunately the elder was successfully saved by Choi Han. The carriage that almost hit someone suddenly stopped. Cale let out a sigh and stepped down from the carriage. He wanted to go check the front himself. Someone also stepped out of the carriage that nearly hit the person. This person was none other than the villain from the novel, Vinian Stan. At that moment a woman walked toward the elder, saying that the elder was filthy, and dared to block the path of Marquis Stan's young master. Hearing this, Choi Han stood up to retort. The carriage almost hit someone, yet you still dare to say such things. The woman continued speaking, saying seeing the Marquis estate's carriage, he should have consciously stepped aside. At the end of the day, it was just that this commoner was too foolish. Hearing these words, Choi Han's expression instantly turned grim. Preview for the next episode. Choi Han asks Cale if he is not angry. Cale says with a sinister smirk, "Why should I be angry? That guy is going to be kicked out of his family soon anyway." Vinian pats the woman on the shoulder and tells her to stop talking. Then Cale also tells Choi Han to say no more. Yet Choi Han still cannot let it go. They clearly could have changed their route. Yet they drove straight into the old man. Cale stares at Vinian before him. He notices that Vinian has blood stains on his sleeve. He guesses this must have rubbed off while Vinian was abusing the Black Dragon. Vinian asks Cale if he is from the Henituse family. Cale says that is correct, and addresses the other as young Master Vinian Stan. Vinian continues, "I heard the Count family has a young master who is extremely free and bold, looking nothing like a noble at all. Meeting you today truly lives up to the rumors. Are you the one representing your family at the festival this year?" Cale thinks to himself that this madman is really asking a question with an obvious answer. "Indeed, I am that notorious trash young master in the rumors." Hearing Cale's reply, Vinian suddenly smiles. He calls Cale a truly interesting person. He looks toward the old man. Even though a lot of time was wasted today because of this obstacle, still, it is quite fortunate to meet young Master Cale. It is just that your servant seems a bit unclear on who the true master of this land is. You really should discipline him properly. At that moment, The old man suddenly dropped to his knees and repeatedly apologized to Vignan. Cale thought to himself that since the Viscount was a running dog of Marquis Stan, he naturally continued that same tyrannical rule. Cale crouched down and patted the old man on the shoulder, asking if there was a tavern nearby. He claimed that he felt uncomfortable all over if he did not drink every day, and asked the old man to lead the way. Then he reached out toward Vignan, saying how glad he was to meet young Master Vignan today. Vignan stared at Cale's right hand that had just touched the old man and hesitated for a moment, then narrowed his eyes and shook his hand anyway. He claimed he was busy and had to take his leave. With that, he immediately pulled his hand back, and finally said see you next time to Cale. Before boarding his carriage and leaving, Cale turned around and patted Choi Han on the shoulder, telling him that most nobles were like this. Then he squatted down again to ask the old man why he was not getting up, and if his leg was injured. Just as Cale was about to have Choi Han send the old man home, the old man insisted he was fine and wanted to take him to the tavern first. The old man said his family happened to sell alcohol, and it was the only inn in the village. Cale thought to himself that since it was the only one, there was nothing he could do. Cale then told Hans to take the old man and get going. Choi Han stopped Cale, asking if he was not angry at all. Cale asked why he should be angry. Were you hoping I would demand an apology for ignoring me, or for almost getting the old man killed? You want me to say that to Vignan, right? But my position does not allow me to do that. After all, they did not provoke me. Still, do not worry. Some scores just have to be settled in kind. That guy Vignan is going to be kicked out of his family soon anyway. Choi Han was stunned by Cale's words and sudden sly grin. Before long, the group arrived at the inn. The old man apologized, saying it was far beneath a noble, and usually just a place where commoners stayed. He asked Cale to bear with it. Seeing the old man so uneasy, Cale patted his shoulder to help him relax, and said that having a place for travelers to stay was already wonderful enough. Watching Cale turn to leave, the old man curiously asked if everyone in Henituse territory was as easygoing as him. Cale smiled and replied, "Are you kidding? I am notorious for having the worst temper around. Everyone else is much easier to get along with than me." The two little ones shook their heads. They clearly disagreed. In the upcoming preview, Cale made promises to them. He told them they could come back for roasted meat after finishing the task. They could eat as much as they wanted. The two little ones happily hopped away to start their journey. Cale heard the butler Hans knocking on his door. He told him to open the door and come in. Hans entered carrying a box in his arms. After handing the box over to Cale, he kept staring at it with curiosity. Cale teased Hans, saying a butler should not wear all his emotions on his face. Hans proudly replied that a butler ought to hold nothing back from his master. Cale told him to get out quickly if there was nothing else. Sitting on the bed, Cale looked over at the 3 wooden boxes. The two little ones also curiously asked him what was inside the boxes. Cale opened the boxes and explained that the items inside could help people punish bad guys and protect themselves at critical moments. A few days before going to the capital, Cale had planned to ask Billows to buy 3 items. However, because they were too expensive, Cale instead had Billows help him rent them. They had agreed to meet in the capital afterward, where Cale would return the items in person. He reached out and touched the items, asking Cale what on earth this orb is. Cale holds it up, saying it is a magic disturbance device worth hundreds of millions of gallons. Hearing how expensive it is completely shocks the two little ones, frightening them into backing away repeatedly. Cale mentions that renting this thing cost 20 million gallons alone. Although expensive, it is sturdy and durable. It can disable image recording devices within a certain range for 40 minutes. With that, Cale unfolds a map for the two little ones to see. There is a mountain next to the village where they are currently staying, and there is a villa on the east side of the mountain. Cale instructs them not to go near that villa, while behind the villa is a mountain ravine. We are going to rescue the little guy being abused inside there. Cale puts the orb into a bag and ties it to the cat, telling them to go in their cat forms and secretly bury the orb in the mountains. The cat asks Cale where they should bury it. Cale looks out the window. Anywhere on the mountain will do. The two little cats meow, saying this task is way too simple. Cale nods. Precisely because it is simple for you too, I am asking you to do it. Completing the mission will reward you with grilled meat. You can eat as much as you want, and upon hearing about grilled meat, the two little ones are thrilled. Then, with a gentle leap from the window, they leave the inn and run toward the mountains. The next day, during a meal, Cale asks Choi Han if he has ever seen a dragon. Choi Han says he has never seen a dragon, but he has seen something similar. Cale asks what they looked like, and if there was anything special about them. Choi Han replies that they were just monsters, with ugly appearances and cruel personalities. That means Choi Han has never truly seen anything like a dragon. The dragon race actually, much like humans, beastmen, and dwarves, has its own emotions and lives. However, most of the dragon race will slowly fall into darkness from the moment they are born. Cale looks at Choi Han and asks if he knows why they turn out that way. They are forced to lose their minds by people, with the sole purpose of controlling them. Trapped in dark environments with no one to rely on. Not only must they endure utter loneliness, but they are also subjected to daily research and abuse, living a life worse than death. Seeing Choi Han's expression, Cale thinks to himself, that's such a kind-hearted guy hearing a story like this was bound to have this kind of reaction. Cale picks up his teacup and says, as it happens, we have one nearby. Hearing those words, Choi Han's anger flares up even more. He asked Cale if Cale would take it in after saving it. Cale replied that he must be out of his mind to take it in. This caught Choi Han by surprise. Cale figured that after being abused for so long, it would never want to be taken in by humans. It would definitely be filled with hatred toward humanity. Besides, dragons naturally believed they were superior to all other species, and were insanely arrogant. After all, there were fewer than 20 dragons across both the eastern and western continents. It was still a very important combat force. Choi Han asked Cale, since he did not plan to keep it, how he intended to handle it. Cale said, dragons should live freely in the way they liked best. They only needed to save it first. So you should help me. Hearing Cale's words, Choi Han was completely fired up and told Cale to name it because he was willing to do anything. Just as Choi Han was about to say that Cale was truly different, he was interrupted and told to have Leon set up a drinking table on the first floor. Cale asked Choi Han to come to his room after everyone was asleep. Claire watched Cale with a worried face as his face turned completely red from drinking. She worriedly asked Hans why he did not stop him. Hans smiled and said it was fine. Cale had promised him that he would not smash things around. Cale walked up to the old man and praised the wine he brewed as truly excellent. He told him to send it over to his subordinates. The vice commander originally wanted to advise him against it. However, Cale leaned in close and said this was his heartfelt gesture, so he should not refuse. Afterward, he waved at Choi Han and asked Choi Han to help him back to his room to rest. The vice commander tried to come forward to support him, but was refused by Cale. Cale said that except for those on guard duty, everyone else should properly relax today. Then he waved at the vice commander and staggered away. Before returning to his room, he told Leon and Hans not to disturb his rest unless there was an emergency. Cale told Choi Han to enter his room through the window after the sun went down. When nighttime arrived, the two little ones asked Cale when they would start. At that moment, Choi Han also arrived. Choi Han jumped in and looked at Cale with curiosity. At this point, Cale had already changed his clothes. Cale told Choi Han to quickly change into the same outfit. Choi Han didn't understand why they needed to wear these clothes. Cale explained that wearing these clothes was the only way to keep Vinyan from suspecting them. After all, what they were planning to do wouldn't be a good thing for Vinyan. Once Choi Han understood, he asked Cale for a mask too. Suddenly, the two little ones meowed, and Choi Han realized the two kittens were there as well. He looked at the kittens curiously. Cale told him they were from the beast race and would be joining them. Then, they arrived at the mountain. Cale arrived at the mountain, checked his watch, and said it was time. Then the group quickly ran toward the cave. Suddenly, the enemy's intrusion alarm was triggered. Cale realized they had to speed up. A guard in front of the cave attacked Choi Han. Choi Han instantly knocked the weapon away. Then, with a swift strike, he knocked the guard unconscious. Soon, another wave of guards arrived. Seeing this, Cale called out fog and began casting his skill, causing a mist to rise around them. The guards stopped in their tracks. Seizing the moment, Cale rushed forward. Suddenly, Choi Han stepped in front of Cale, declaring that as long as he was there, no one would get past. The captain ordered two of his men to stop them. In an instant, Choi Han took down both guards. This left the guard captain terrified and frozen in place. Choi Han's skill was so impressive it even made Cale a bit nervous. Once his surprise wore off, Cale quickly ran toward the cave. He told Choi Han he'd leave the outside to him. After entering the prison, Cale found a guard struggling with a device that wouldn't start. Hearing a sound, the guard turned around immediately. He walked toward Cale, trembling. Soon, a poisonous fog began to surround the man. By the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. After a moment of agony, the guard collapsed. Cale searched his body and found a key. Seeing no other guards, the two little ones hopped around. They joined Cale in searching for the cell holding the black dragon. When they reached the innermost cell, they finally discovered the bruised and battered Noir. Preview for next episode. Cale looked at Noir, and the little guy immediately opened his eyes and stared at Cale. Cale finally found Noir in the cell. Thinking that Vinyan was truly a cruel madman, Cale opened the cell door and called out. However, Noir just lay there quietly and motionlessly. Cale took off his mask and said Noir could leave now. Hearing that he could leave, Noir suddenly opened his eyes and stared at Cale. Cale felt that the little guy still had pretty good spirits. Then he carefully picked him up and carried him out, gently placing him beside the two little ones. The two little ones circled around him, feeling sorry that Noir was covered in injuries. The gray cat ran over and patted Cale, wanting Cale to treat Noir. Cale said he had already prepared medicine and would treat his wounds shortly. First, however, they needed to remove the suppression orb from the dragon's neck. Otherwise it would not work. Cale began looking around for something, when his path was suddenly blocked by something. He saw a guard who had been poisoned just moments before. Cale gave him a kick and muttered that he was in the way. The little black dragon seemed to really hate this guard. Cale walked up in front of a wall. He recalled the escape tunnel built by Vinyan from the novel. I remember following the wall like this. There should be an unusually smooth section. This must be it. If I push hard enough, the passage will appear. Choi Han hurried over at that moment. He said he had taken care of everyone outside. He looked at the little fellow beside them, with a black body and covered in injuries. So this was the black dragon Cale wanted to save. Choi Han took off his mask. Just like you said, I let the fleeing ones go. I only knocked out the ones who attacked. Cale praised him for doing a good job. Then he tapped lightly on the wall surface. He told Choi Han to try punching right here. Choi Han asked if he should use his full strength. Cale thought to himself that the whole place would collapse if this guy used full power. He told Choi Han to hit it gently. Seeing Choi Han approach the wall, Cale quickly stepped back. Choi Han found the right spot and raised his fist to gather strength. Then he struck the wall swiftly. A large hole was instantly blasted into the wall. Choi Han picked up a torch and led the two little ones out along with Cale. Soon, they walked out of the cave. Moore looked around in disbelief. Cale placed him on a stone. Moore started staring at Cale again. Suddenly, Cale took out a large pair of shears. He firmly grabbed the collar binding Noir. Noir closed his eyes in fear. Cale slid the shears in and cut down hard. He completely removed the collar from Noir's neck. Noir shifted his gaze back to Cale. Cale remarked, "What are you looking at? Have you never seen a handsome guy?" Noir clearly looked wary of the two of them. Cale opened a bottle of potion. He crouched down in front of Noir. Noir bared his teeth at Cale instead. Cale said, "Do you know how much money I spent on you?" Then he grabbed Noir by the chin. Noir was reminded of past abuses that felt just like this. However, Cale shoved the bottle of potion straight into his mouth. Feeding it to him, he said, "This stuff is very expensive. You should recover pretty soon, you little fool." Right after he finished speaking, Noir's body began to glow. All his wounds were healed in an instant. Noir looked at his own hands. It felt amazing. Cale suddenly asked what he planned to do next. Knowing that he could speak human language, he told him to answer. What did he want to do now that he was free? Noir hesitated for a moment before speaking up. It just wanted to survive properly. Preview for the next episode. Noir suddenly appears by the window, holding that discarded potion bottle in its hands. It did not want to be tamed by anyone. Cale felt that as long as it liked it, that was enough. After all, being a dragon, it could completely go live a free life. Cale had no intention of taming it at all. These words made Noir grow agitated. It bared its teeth at Cale and shouted that he was lying. Humans were nothing but deceitful liars. It would never believe him. Cale's legs had gone numb from squatting. He got up and said, "Anyway, you can go live the life you want from now on. Unbound by anyone and completely free." With that, Cale and the others turned and left. Cale felt this plan went perfectly. They saved the village and Noir, while also screwing over Vinyan. Through the dragon, Choi Han should also be able to feel the true meaning of freedom. As for Cale, he was responsible for finishing the task quickly and heading home to live as a wealthy slacker. Noir seemed a bit dejected. It muttered quietly under its breath about hating humans. It approached that potion bottle and went back to grumbling that humans were all terrible. On the way back, the two little ones were extremely happy. They figured Noir would definitely follow them. Soon they would have a new younger brother. Then Cale would surely be their mother. "Dad, I choose Choi Han." Cale began to explain the logic. Dragons are naturally proud and independent, so they won't submit to humans. Besides, after being abused for so long, Noir must absolutely hate humans. The two little ones sighed in unison. It seems there's no hope of getting a little brother. Cale told the two children to go retrieve the mana confusion orb. Then, he patted Choi Han on the shoulder and told him he'd worked hard today. Cale thought that in the original novel storyline, this was the first time Choi Han had saved a life. By changing the target of the rescue from a village to a dragon, he'd killed two birds with one stone. While Cale was secretly celebrating, Choi Han interrupted him. He asked Cale what he would do if Noir's true inner thoughts were that he wanted to be with Cale. Cale stubbornly insisted that such a thing would never happen. Choi Han spoke up. And Cale thought that if that were actually the case, his future life would be far too troublesome. He quickly turned around and slipped away, claiming that he never thinks about things that won't happen. Not long after he left, Cale felt as if something was following him. He looked toward the forest and told himself not to overthink it. It must have been just his imagination. Late that night at the inn, Cale had already fallen asleep in bed. Suddenly, Noir appeared on the windowsill. He perched on the sill, tightly clutching that medicine bottle. The next morning at breakfast, Cale gulped down a glass of water. Cale figured he must have drank too much yesterday, because his stomach felt awful. He did not sleep well either, feeling like someone was staring at him all night. Choi Han told Cale that the cleanup work was already finished. All tracks on the way back had been completely erased, and false tracks were left in the opposite direction. The mission to rescue the Black Dragon was over. At this rate, they would reach the midway point Cale mentioned in just a few days. Cale confirmed that the city was called Pasita. Once they arrived there, the two of them would go their separate ways. The road leading to Pasita was much easier to travel than the previous ones, so they would arrive quickly. He had returned to the Viscount's estate to observe the situation, only to find soldiers and knights fleeing the village in a panic. Cale thought they must have. Choi Han started hesitating and stammering, and Cale told him to spit it out without beating around the bush. Choi Han discovered that the secret exit used for escaping yesterday had been completely blown to pieces. Not only the exit, but the surrounding trees and grass were completely overturned. What Cale wanted to do. The two little ones and Choi Han were all stunned, realizing just how powerful the Black Dragon really was. The little guy probably destroyed that area because he was afraid someone would find them. Plus, there were magic devices there that are quite sensitive. Choi Han stood up in surprise. So that's how it is. Dragons really are extraordinary. Cale waved his hand at Choi Han, signaling him to leave now that they were finished talking. Before leaving, Cale asked Choi Han if he wanted to get some sleep before they departed. Choi Han replied that he still needed to help Crocs. Cale joked that the two of them were becoming close. Choi Han immediately looked disgusted and said their relationship was actually terrible. Cale thought to himself that this matched the plot of the novel. Next episode preview. Isn't that the night we knocked unconscious yesterday? Choi Han admitted he had misjudged the situation. Choi Han and Cale headed downstairs one after the other. When they reached the bottom of the stairs, Cale noticed Choi Han had stopped moving. Choi Han's gaze was fixed on something. Isn't this the night we knocked out yesterday? Cale walked up to Choi Han and gave him a nudge with his foot. He then asked Choi Han what he was so afraid of and why he wouldn't keep going. Choi Han explained that based on how hard he'd hit him, it should have taken days for that person to get out of bed. He admitted he had misjudged the opponent and thought they were too weak. Cale found a table and sat down. An old man immediately came over to serve him wine. He used it to help sober up. Everyone was drunk. An embarrassed knight said that a thief had broken into the Viscount's estate yesterday and stolen some items. So they were asking if anyone had been robbed. Cale thought to himself while drinking, I guess stealing a dragon counts as stealing. After finishing his drink, Cale slammed the wine cup heavily onto the table. The sound immediately drew everyone's attention. Cale put on a hooligan-like expression and said, What are you all staring at me for? The vice commander quickly explained. The knight praised Cale for being easygoing, and then they left. Cale thought that they probably wouldn't suspect them again this time. After all, seeing nobles traveling on the king's orders end up in such a drunken state would be convincing. Vinyan should be looking for organizations related to the star emblem instead. Cale looked at the alcohol he had consumed and asked Leon to get him a glass of honey lemon water. Figuring he left no evidence behind, Vinyan must be furious right now. He had been left paralyzed from the waist down due to his younger brother Vinyan. To stand up again, he read through numerous books and finally stumbled upon a clue in an ancient text. The book briefly mentioned rebirth and Stone Tower. Although the thick volumes only mentioned those two terms, Taylor still decided to visit the places related to them. The novel stated that Taylor would also head to Pasita. Inside the carriage, the two little ones asked Cale if they were going to camp out in the wild tonight. Cale confirmed it. Starting today, they would occasionally have to brave the elements outside. Cale thought that he needed to hurry to that city. There was an ancient power there, similar to the indestructible shield, and it was the power Taylor was searching for. After all, that power could not cure his broken legs. In the novel, after he obtained the power and discovered the truth, falling into total despair. Besides, even with the ancient power, Taylor could not survive his brother's hands. Suddenly, the gray cat interrupted Cale, saying she heard Hans mention that Stone Tower could grant any wish, and it was supposed to be very pretty there. The two little ones started acting cute, saying they wanted to go make a wish with Cale. The red cat said she hoped the little dragon could come with them. Cale immediately refused, leaving the red cat looking aggrievedly at her sister. By evening, Cale ordered a halt, planning to find a place to pitch camp and rest, since riding in the carriage for so long was exhausting. The next morning, a deer was unexpectedly left outside the camp. Hans felt it must have been delivered intentionally. Cale looked uneasy at the pattern on the ground, realizing the person who left the prey could not write and used a symbol instead. Cale looked at Choi Han, who was secretly smiling, figuring this guy definitely knew who had been there yesterday. Anyone who could make him pretend not to know must be that little black dragon. Cale figured it was best to just play dumb, but at the very next camp, it was a wild boar. The next camp was full of rabbits. The two little ones exclaimed how magical it all was. When they heard Hans say that wishing was useless, the two little ones felt like they'd been cheated. Cale told Hans they should go check out the tower. After leaving the village, Noir kept following Cale. Every day, he would bring prey in different and creative ways. Cale was exasperated with Noir. He wondered if the dragon would actually follow them into the city. Choi-han thought Noir was cute and as innocent as a child. Cale didn't see it that way. He remembered the terrifying scenes of the black dragon destroying mountains. Didn't he say he hated humans? The two little ones were incredibly excited to see the city. They kept saying how magical the place was. There was a stone tower in front of every single house. Cale explained that this was Pasita, the city of stone towers. Afterward, the group found an inn to stay in. Cale was surprised that a place so obsessed with stones would frequently hold stone tower celebrations. Hans mentioned that he knew the reason behind it. It was an old story passed down, both very sad and deeply educational. Cale told him to skip it if it was too long. Seeing Hans still wanted to continue, Cale asked if he was even listening. Hans completely ignored Cale. He said this was an ancient legend. Hearing it was an ancient story, Cale actually got interested. He picked up his wine glass and told Hans to go on. Hans happily cleared his throat. Legend says this city was abandoned by the gods a long time ago. Hearing that, Cale looked surprised. He thought to himself, Pasita was abandoned by the gods. What kind of nonsense is that? Why did I never see this story in the novel? Cale thought about it for a moment, and since this was his first time hearing it, he naturally had no idea. Cale pointed at Hans and scolded him for being so cheeky. Hans added that he also did not know why the gods would do that. It was just that slowly, people started building stone towers. It was an act of prayer to entrust their wishes. Cale asked if those people's wishes ever came true. Hans said no. Those prayers had zero effect at all. And so inside the city, if they were abandoned, then they wouldn't need to serve the gods anymore. Instead, the stone tower became a sort of agreement. The stone tower replaced the temples and became a pact between people. If their wishes were fulfilled, they would tear the stone tower down. After hearing this, Pasita found it quite interesting. To make a wish come true, one can only rely on oneself. Destroying the stone tower meant overcoming one's obstacles. Cale asked Hans, "Is it a lie that the gods help people fulfill their wishes?" Hans replied that it was. Even though they were abandoned by the gods, everyone was still full of hope. Cale told Hans to look under the table. He saw the two little ones glaring at him angrily. Feeling awkward, he asked the two little ones why they were angry. He tried to coax them with dried meat. Cale thought to himself, of course they're angry. You just told them that's where wishes come true. And now you're saying it's not true. Hans continued to coax them. Do not be angry, little kittens. I will go get you some delicious treats right now. When asked if he could leave, Cale told him that it did not matter if he did not come back right away. Hans said he would be right back and left. Seeing that Leon was still standing there, Cale told him to go back and rest early as well. Leon asked Cale if Choi-han was leaving in 2 days. Cale confirmed it and asked if Leon wanted to go with Choi-han. Leon was speechless for a moment before smiling and saying he would not leave the young master behind. Cale remarked that they would still see each other after arriving in the capital. In his heart, however, Cale thought how wonderful it would be if they both went to Claire's kingdom instead. Cale had been hoping Leon would say he wanted to leave with them. Instead, Leon said he looked forward to meeting Choi-han in the capital and hoped everyone would arrive there safely. Cale sighed. He thought to himself that he had failed once again to send the two of them away together. He then told Leon to go rest early. Turning around, he saw the two little ones were already crying tearfully. They kept complaining that Hans was a liar. Cale remembered the ancient power of Pasita described in the novel. It was a power left behind by the ancients, born from the vitality of the heart. Cale suddenly stood up and walked outside. He flung the door open, startling Hans. Cale put on his coat. He told Hans, "Let's go take a look at the stone tower. Bring those two along and call Choi-han as well." Hans was completely bewildered. Cale wondered what kind of promise those three 150-year-olds had been working for over a century to build a stone tower in the wind. Since they were building a stone tower, he decided to make it a cool one. Next episode preview. The man in the wheelchair is Taylor, the eldest son of the Stan family. And this is his priest, Cage. "Young Master Cale, I have something to ask you." The two little ones cried their eyes out after being tricked. To investigate the ancient power, Cale decided to take them to the stone tower. Soon, the group arrived at the ancient stone tower. Cale suddenly noticed someone in a wheelchair to his left. Cale thought, as expected, pushing his wheelchair was the priestess Cage. Cale decided to observe them closely. After all, his knowledge of them was limited to the novel. Taylor asked Cage why she suddenly wanted to come here. Cage replied that she had been having dreams for many days straight. Her dreams even contained a divine revelation. It said their benefactor would appear right here. It also said this person's actions were so unpredictable that even the gods could not fully foresee them. Taylor was somewhat surprised. Was there really something even the gods could not predict? Cage scoffed that half of what the gods said was utter nonsense, and she had no idea what was accurate. Taylor protested that she could not just call divine words nonsense. Cage sighed. She told him not to be so reverent toward gods who would not even give them food. Besides, expecting a benefactor to appear in their current situation sounded completely unreliable. Mentioning food immediately made Cage's stomach growl. Taylor admitted he would really love some cold beer. Cage chimed in that she was craving roasted meat. With that, both of them burst out laughing. Taylor pointed ahead and announced he would treat. Cage, as a priestess, resolved to accompany them all the way. Cale memorized their appearances. He just needed to bump into them head-on later. At that moment, Hans suddenly leaned in. He told Cale that he had just seen the eldest son of Marquis Stan. Cale asked in surprise how Hans knew about that. Hans pointed to his own head, saying that the intelligence on those noble scions was all memorized right here. He noted that one of the three men in wheelchairs just now had the red snake totem of the Marquis family. Cale thought that Hans usually looked foolish, but he actually had some competence after all. Hans asked Cale what he planned to do next. After a moment of thought, Cale decided to leave them alone for now. To his surprise, the stone tower was even more ordinary than Cale had imagined. It did not look good either. Choi Han suddenly walked up to the front of the stone tower, closed his eyes, and began to make a wish. Cale figured that Choi Han's wish must be to go back home. He had been born into a happy family and raised by kind people, yet still suffered despair. Choi Han suddenly turned around and said he had something to ask Cale, and also one more thing to tell him. Cale felt uneasy seeing this serious expression. He wondered what Choi Han wanted to ask. Choi Han pointed at the stone tower and asked Cale why he wasn't making a wish. Cale breathed a sigh of relief. Why be so serious about such a simple question? Cale explained that making a wish creates expectations, and that living without expectations is the most comfortable way to live. He thought to himself that before coming to this novel world, he'd been taught a hard lesson about life by lottery tickets. Hans gave a thumbs up in strong agreement. He said that there are no dreams or hopes in this world. Cale scratched his head and told Hans to take the two little ones to look around. Choi Han told Cale that Noir had actually followed them into the city. Cale decided to pretend he didn't know. He looked around. He wondered if the little guy had actually followed him all the way here. After searching, the two found nothing and left. At that moment, a footprint appeared on the flat ground. It turned out Noir had been following Cale invisibly the whole time. The next morning arrived. Cale headed to the ancient power's tomb and said he would only take Choi Han. He originally wanted to go alone, but fearing everyone would think he was a weakling and insist on coming along, he said he'd only take Choi Han. Hearing that the young master wanted to take Choi Han, the vice-captain could only agree gloomily. Hans shouted about taking care of the little kitten and then dashed off in an instant. After the two walked for a while, Choi Han asked if he had to do something today as well. If others heard that, they'd think I'm causing trouble every single day. Next episode preview. Noir let out a loud roar, telling Cale not to go over there, and then rushed toward him, saying he was too weak and would definitely get hurt. Seeing that Cale was completely unharmed, Noir felt a bit awkward. He told himself he was just passing through. Cale prepared to obtain another ancient power. He told Choi Han that he was heading to the mountain ahead and asked him to wait. Cale was very satisfied with Choi Han on this point, as he rarely questioned the things Cale wanted to do. After a while, the two arrived in front of the entrance. Choi Han suddenly stopped him, saying with a disappointed expression that he would be leaving tomorrow. Cale, of course, remembered this, since he was the one who had planned for Choi Han to leave. Choi Han mentioned he had been quite troubled lately, and that there was something he wanted to tell Cale. Cale thought to himself, it seems this is what he wanted to talk about yesterday. He told Choi Han to speak his mind and stop hesitating. Choi Han's expression became serious, and he warned that Leon was actually a dangerous person. Cale was stunned, and I was stunned too. I thought Choi Han was about to say he wanted to be a father to the children. Cale didn't expect Choi Han to be so blunt, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if he should tell Choi Han the truth. So, with a conflicted look, he replied, is that so? This made Choi Han excited. He was curious why Cale didn't seem surprised at all, since Leon was a ruthless man who had survived countless battles. Choi Han assumed Cale kept him around because he already knew the truth. Cale thought, it seems Choi Han is convinced I have no idea how strong Leon actually is. Choi Han continued, it's not just Cale. Everyone else seems to be unaware as well. Leon radiates a dark, sinister energy. Even so, you are still keeping him around. Cale thought to himself that once they reached the capital, he would just pack up both of them and hand them over to Choi Han. Cale asked Choi Han, since he clearly knew Leon was a dangerous individual, why he chose to let him go. Choi Han thought for a long time without knowing how to express it. Cale cut straight to the point, stating that it was because Leon had never harmed Choi Han. Regardless of anything else, Leon had served as his butler for 18 years. As a servant of the Henituse household, he had always been dutiful. And to Cale, Choi Han was no different. Possessing such overwhelming power, would not that also make him a dangerous person? As it turned out, Leon had been up in the tree listening to their entire conversation. Cale continued. Since Leon was his servant, then he was simply a servant. Just like how Choi Han was here working hard to earn his keep. Cale said he was short on time, and walked away without another word. Leon suddenly jumped down from a tree in front of Choi Han, and asked if he heard him clearly, saying he practically raised Cale himself. Choi Han thought Leon was going to follow, so he reached out to stop him, reminding him that Cale just said no one was allowed to follow him from now on. Leon looked at Cale leaving and told Choi Han, "Fine, you brat." Thinking to himself, it was a wasted trip after all. Cale soon found the cave entrance, only to find it surprisingly small. Complaining that his choice of clothes was a terrible mistake, he crawled inside through the opening and stood up to dust himself off, discovering that the wind here was far more violent than expected, actually cracking the stone walls. Without Cage's help in the original story, Taylor would have had a hard time claiming this power. As Cale moved forward, Noir suddenly chased after him, shouting at Cale, "Do not go over there. You are too weak and you will get hurt." The next second, the fierce wind was blocked by Cale's indestructible shield. Noir looked at the sight in complete bewilderment, then awkwardly claimed he was just passing by. He said he was not following Cale on purpose. Cale turned his head and thought to himself, he did not have time to worry about the silly dragon right now. He needed to get the ancient power now before the wind grew stronger. Noir looked at Cale with some surprise. He wondered how someone so frail could possess such a strange and powerful energy. Cale realized that the closer he got to the center, the stronger the wind became. Still, the shield should be able to block this intensity. If worst came to worst, he could shrink the shield to reduce resistance. Suddenly, Cale heard a voice saying how much it regretted everything. Cale instantly remembered that chatty tree from before. It felt like none of these ancient powers were ever normal. The voice said Cale possessed a familiar power, but it did not want Cale to have this power again. A strong gust of wind blew toward Cale. The voice muttered that it had betrayed its companions, leaving it as the only one to survive. It had hoped everyone could live, but that wish could no longer be realized. Left with only endless grief, Cale just felt this guy was way too noisy. His companions must have been annoyed to death by him as well. As Cale was about to reach the stone tower, that voice spoke again. It has no power of rebirth. It can only protect itself while failing to guard anyone else. Cale lowered his head and kept walking. He muttered that surviving was what truly mattered. I'm going to take this power that protects itself. Suddenly, the wind pressure intensified once more. Sensing trouble, Cale quickly shrank the shield. Even when sharp swords and blades slashed across its body, it would not die. This kind of power is nothing more than a curse. My heart kept pounding, yet I could not move at all. The end of that agony filled me with fear. Cale forced himself to take a final step. As he got close to the stone tower, the wind suddenly stopped. The stone tower kept chattering away. It said that in the end, it chose to cast away its beliefs. Cale looked at the stone tower. Then he put on his gloves. He wondered if there was a way to make this ordinary pile of stones look cooler. He picked up a stone and placed it right on top of the tower. Suddenly, the entire stone tower began to glow amidst a loud sound. The black dragon nearby looked somewhat surprised. The stone tower muttered that after fighting those guys, it realized they were merely humans. The creatures in the dark forest always fed it unpalatable things. Cale felt a sense of familiarity hearing this. Stone Tower said that when he built the tower, he hoped time could turn back. He had abandoned his companions, yet selfishly wanted to find happiness. He couldn't forgive himself for being that way. Cale took off his gloves and said irritably, "People are naturally selfish." Hearing Cale say this, Stone Tower suddenly fell silent. Cale thought it was finished. But then, the guy suddenly started crying and said, his sister had said the exact same thing. Cale felt like he was about to be driven crazy by it. Stone Tower added that Cale's rude manner was just like his own brother's. Hearing this, Cale smiled. He thought, this is exactly what I was waiting for. Then he raised his foot and destroyed the stone tower. Seeing what appeared, Noir was surprised again. He thought, this guy is way too strange. In the next episode preview, Noir intentionally turns his head away to avoid eye contact with Cale. Cale suddenly speaks to him, startling Noir. Choi Han asks in surprise if Cale had been rolling around on the mountain. This sequence of actions really shocked Noir. Cale reached out to take the ancient power. The moment he grasped it, the ancient power transformed into a beam of light. It entered Cale's heart. He placed his hand over his heart. This power significantly boosted his healing. making his recovery several times faster than a normal person's. Soon after, Cale and Noir walked out of the cave. Cale turned to look at Noir, but Noir turned his head to avoid his gaze. Cale asked if he wanted to follow him. Hearing this, Noir flapped around in a panic. While casting a bit of magic, he hesitantly said that Cale was too weak and needed protection, but that he hated humans. After saying that, Noir disappeared. Cale thought to himself that children are just fickle. On the way back, Cale could constantly hear footsteps coming from the grass. So he shouted, "You little stupid dragon, I know you're in the grass." Hearing this, Noir immediately stopped in his tracks, feeling embarrassed while remaining invisible. Cale looked at him and decided to just let him follow along like that. Soon, Cale reached the entrance at the foot of the mountain. Choi Han looked at him in surprise, wondering if he had been rolling around on the mountain. Cale could only look on helplessly, wondering how he ended up looking like a mess. Night falls over a location in the suburbs of Pasita. Cage suddenly starts acting very strangely and tells Taylor to stay quiet. Seeing how uncomfortable Cage looks, Taylor asks if the gods are speaking to her again. Cage turns around and kicks over a chair, then strides out the door. Taylor worries something is wrong. While gesturing for the attendants not to follow, the two of them head outside, only to discover a small stone tower. There is a message written right beside the stone tower. Cage reads the words and laughs, saying it is actually real. The message reads that anyone wishing to make their desire a reality must knock it down. Cage holds her head in frustration and explains that the god wants Taylor to push over the stone tower. Taylor is taken aback, asking what the tower represents. Cage replies that she normally only hears the voice of a god once a year. This time, the god did not waste any words, only stating that this is the turning point that can change their destiny. If they want to live a comfortable life, they should not knock it down. Cage then notices a letter pinned beneath the stone tower. She turned to look at Taylor. She said there was no dangerous aura coming from the stone tower. She asked him what choice he wanted to make. Taylor did not hesitate at all. He directly told her to knock it down. Cage waved her hand and destroyed the stone tower. Taylor had never planned on living a comfortable life. He only wanted to heal his broken legs and keep moving forward. Against Marquis Stan, Taylor opened the letter. It said the Crown Prince possessed something known as the Healing Star. It could cure disabilities. However, it could only be used once. The Crown Prince wanted to keep things under control, and what he wanted, you can trade with him. Taylor excitedly said that this truly was a turning point. Seeing how excited he was, Cage took the letter and continued reading. Although your legs cannot move, your head, arms, and everything else are completely fine. Taylor Stan, you can judge all of this for yourself now. After reading the letter, Taylor told the butler to take charge here. The two of them should head straight to the capital. They needed to set off as soon as possible to catch the royal event. With that, both of them smiled happily again. Seeing them like that, the two little ones were happy too. The task entrusted to them was finally completed. They could finally go back for a late-night snack. In the preview for the next episode, Cale tosses something to Choi Han. Choi Han happily says he will catch up to Cale soon. Moore looks down at Choi Han from above and quietly casts a spell on him. Choi Han is already packed and ready. Seeing him about to leave with his pack on his back, Cale calls out to Choi Han and throws a bag over to him and looks at the contents inside. Cale starts acting all proud and aloof first, asking Choi Han if he has a problem with it. He tells him to throw it away if he does not want it. Cale finally turned around, said goodbye, and walked away. Choi Han tightly gripped the bag Cale had given him. He smiled happily and said that he would catch up to Cale very soon. He declared he would grow stronger and let Choi Han know in the capital that he was the true guard of the young master. Hans looked a bit awkward at that statement. He simply wished Choi Han a safe journey. B. Crocs muttered that he would sharpen his blade and wait for him in the capital. Leon smiled and wished him luck as well. The little ones also ran over to bid Choi Han farewell. Moore watched Choi Han leaving from upstairs. Without a word, the young dragon just frowned slightly. Then he gently raised his little paw and cast a spell on Choi Han. Afterward, he closed his eyes and went back to sleep. Choi Han stood up and said it was about time to leave. He told everyone they would meet again in the capital. Following Choi Han's departure, Cale and the others left Pasita and continued toward the capital. By evening, they found a spot to set up camp for the night. Cale heard the two little ones whispering about something. He lowered his head to look at them. They were talking in a very serious tone. The little ones are still talking with serious faces. Cale suddenly interrupts and asks what is going on. With a mischievous smile, he asks if it is about something specific. Just then, a carriage suddenly stops beside the camp. The vice captain immediately runs over with high alertness to check the situation. The visitor steps out and bows. He asks if they can rest nearby. The vice captain asks who they are. The man introduces himself as Tom, a knight from Marquis Stan's estate. The person inside the carriage speaks up. They say they only dared to approach after spotting the Henituse crest. He introduces himself as Taylor Stan. Seeing Cale lower his head in thought, Taylor says they will leave immediately if it is inconvenient. He thinks to himself that he is just a good-for-nothing abandoned by his family. Surely the Henituse family would not want to stay near him. Hearing that Taylor is about to leave, Cale immediately calls out to stop him. Walking closer, he says, "This land does not belong to the Henituse family anyway." He welcomes them to stay here. Reaching out his hand to Taylor, he introduces himself as Cale Henituse. Taylor opens the carriage door and explains that his legs are disabled, so he cannot step down from the carriage. Cale keeps his hand extended, saying that he understands. And so, the two of them shake hands right there. Taylor said he was glad to meet Cale. He also introduced his companion beside him, Priest Cage. Cage suddenly put on a friendly expression, saying she was glad to meet Cale and wishing him a pleasant evening. Cale said thank you out loud, while thinking to himself, like hell it will be pleasant. In the novel, Cage hated people acting nice the most. Yet she was acting nice right in front of him. Then Cale smiled warmly and said, "It is a shame he does not believe in gods." That remark left both of them looking surprised. Cage thought to herself, how could someone start a conversation by picking a fight? Cale looked at their carriage, thinking that Taylor had spent all his money trying to hide from Vinyan. If he wanted to help them reach the capital and successfully see the crown prince. Cale waved his hand and called Hans over, telling him to assist Taylor. He asked Hans to prepare some food for them and help them pitch a tent. He left the rest for Hans to handle. Hans told him not to worry, saying he would serve them just as well as he served young Master Cale. After giving his instructions, Cale said goodbye to Taylor. Taylor expressed his gratitude for Cale's consideration. As he left, Cale told the vice captain to look after them as well. Back in the carriage, the two little ones excitedly mentioned that they knew those two. Cale told them to pretend they didn't, just as they were pretending they didn't know Noir was following them. The gray kitten asked Cale if little brother dragon would keep following them. When Cale suddenly smiled, the two little ones immediately felt something was wrong. Cale decided to make good use of this silly little dragon. After all, in front of it, even someone like Claire or the guards were nothing. The next morning, Cale noticed that Taylor and the others were discussing something. Cale asked Hans what was going on. Hans replied that young Master Taylor had some misunderstandings and was feeling worried. Cale quickly walked over and asked Taylor what had happened. Seeing Cale approach, Taylor immediately apologized with a serious expression. He explained that their movements had been discovered and that a wild boar was clearly threatening them. Cage added excitedly that they had come in secret, yet there was a power present that even he couldn't detect. He felt this was far too provocative. Such a provocation was simply too much, but Cale just looked at the drawing made by Noir on the ground, looking rather helpless. The wild boar that suddenly appeared in the camp made Taylor mistakenly believe he was being tracked. Cage was also extremely agitated, saying she could not sense the other party's presence at all. Taylor wanted to keep talking about this matter, but Cale interrupted him and called Crocs over, telling everyone to make roasted meat to eat. Crocs took out the ingredients, proving he could make top-tier roasted meat out in the wild. Listening to their conversation, Taylor was completely baffled. Cale explained that someone in their group was specifically responsible for delivering ingredients, and that this person was rather shy, which is why they could not sense them. Hearing this, they all blushed in embarrassment, realizing they had misunderstood. Taylor and the others asked if they could follow behind Cale if he did not mind. Cale had already guessed their intentions. Wanting to compensate them, he agreed. Cale figured both of them could be useful. Taylor mentioned they would leave once they reached the outskirts of the capital. Cale agreed and had Hans send some food over to them. Soon after, Cage sought out Cale alone. She was curious if Cale truly did not believe in gods. Cale was slightly taken aback and stated that he indeed did not believe in them. Upon confirming this, Cage hesitated before saying she understood. Back by Taylor's side, Taylor asked her what was wrong. Cage said she had a strange feeling, as if the god of death was gently stroking her head with pity. The day before they reached the capital, Taylor came to find Cale carrying a bottle of wine. He remarked that according to rumors, Taylor added that rumors truly could not be trusted. Cale was completely unlike what people said, even putting himself out to accommodate them in his carriage. He even told his subordinates to take good care of them both, and most importantly, to treat Taylor like a normal person. Taylor mentioned wanting to have a drink with Cale before leaving. After they sat down, Cale closed the door and asked what they wanted. Taylor asked Cale what kind of person he thought he was. Cale was momentarily taken aback, then directly threw a money pouch onto the table. This action took Taylor and Cage completely by surprise. Cale said the Henituse family was notoriously wealthy, so he figured they came for money. Both of them looked rather awkward, not expecting Cale to guess it so easily. Cale said he knew about their predicament, and that they would need plenty of funds to live in the capital. Now that a wealthy benefactor was right in front of them, they should try asking to borrow some. Taylor thought to himself that Cale was right. They were indeed in desperate need of money right now. Even if Cale refused, he definitely would not tell Vinian, because Cale was a kind person at heart, and someone who hid his true talents. This was how Taylor saw Cale. Cale asked if the two of them planned to enter the capital through the temple. Taylor replied that it was indeed their plan. Cale told them that even so, word would reach Vinian within a day. Taylor was surprised by Cale's insight. Cage was curious about why Cale cared about this matter. Cale did not answer directly, pointing instead to a money bag. He told them to leave their subordinates at the inn, ride in Cale's carriage to enter the city tomorrow, and let the others in a few days later, concealing the life forms within the area. Hearing this, Taylor asked in shock why Cale was helping him like this. There was no benefit in it for Cale at all. Cale thought to himself that helping Taylor would make things easier later on since their territories were close. Yet out loud, he claimed it was because he pitied Taylor, the eldest son abandoned by his family over crippled legs. If things went on like this, he would die before long no matter what his reasons were. That he actually came to borrow money from a rumored thug. This made Cale feel that Taylor was truly pitiful. Taylor looked at his legs and gave a bitter smile. He thanked Cale for his sympathy. Cale said he'd be happy to help, but the matter had to be kept absolutely secret. He warned that if this ever put him in a difficult position, Cale would leak the truth. Cage asked if he would tell Vinian, and Cale nodded immediately. To ease Cale's concerns, Cage and Taylor swore an oath to the god of death. They vowed that, other than Cale, they would never mention this to anyone else. If they broke their oath, the god of death would punish them and notify Cale. After the agreement was made, Taylor brought out some red wine. He somehow produced a glass from nowhere. A speechless Cale remarked that one should use a proper glass for such an important day. After pouring Cale a drink, Taylor asked Cale if he wanted a beautiful and kind-hearted older sister. Cale said he didn't want one. The two looked at each other and laughed. On this moonless night, a bond was formed between them over this glass of wine. Next episode preview. Taylor warns Cale to be careful of the crown prince. Noir stared blankly at the food on the table. Cale thought, eat up. Later, while the group was in the carriage heading to the capital, Taylor mentioned that the royal celebration was a massive event for the whole country to celebrate. But Cale didn't seem very happy about it. Cale thought to himself that in the novel, a great disaster was caused by a mysterious group, and he wanted to stop it. Cale said that this celebration wasn't exactly something Taylor should be happy about either. Taylor replied with a wry smile and seriously warned Cale to be careful of the crown prince. The crown prince was the one who suggested gathering all the noble children this time. Cale replied with a smile. The crown prince in the novel was exceptionally good at flattering and praising people. He would build trust with the other person first and then use them. Among his most representative victims was Choi Han, who was hailed as a friend and a hero. Even though he used people, he always claimed that everything he did was for the kingdom and its citizens. Cale told Taylor not to worry and that he would keep a low profile. Hearing Cale talk about keeping a low profile, they all stared at him in silence. Cale added that even trouble would be fine. Cage remarked that Cale looking slightly mischievous suited him best right now. Cale looked outside, realizing they must have reached the capital. This place was far more magnificent than the novel described. The capital was a land filled with many legends about rocks. There was a legend of a rock guardian deity who stood at the very front when darkness descended upon the continent and protected this land and its people with its own life. Taylor said he really liked the story because such a guardian deity did not actually exist in reality. Cale could not agree with the ideas in that story. However, he had not seen this story mentioned in the novel. It must have been part of the book he had not read yet. Cale told Taylor that the city gates were just ahead and handed the magic device to Taylor, telling them to activate it. Soon, the deputy commander knocked on the carriage door. To inspect Cale, Cale suddenly kicked the door open, putting on an act of being heavily drunk. That startled them, as Cale's infamous reputation was well known even to the people of the capital. He motioned for them to go ahead and check. The guard walked up to the door and saw only 2 bottles of wine inside the empty carriage. He immediately stepped back and bowed, telling Cale he could pass through, and welcoming them to the capital. Cale wore a mischievous grin, remarking on their welcome. Taylor took off the magic device, saying it had been a long time since anyone had welcomed them like that. Soon, the carriage arrived at the western side of the capital. Cale instructed Taylor that Leon would help clear the way once they arrived. Taylor just needed to step out of the carriage when the time came. He also told him to pretend that everything that happened before never took place. Looking at the grand estate before him, Cale thought it truly lived up to the Henituse name. It was far better than the residences of other local nobles. Upon entering, 2 rows of servants bowed to welcome Cale simultaneously, ready to serve him with utmost devotion. Seeing this, Cale felt they were being overly submissive, leaving him somewhat at a loss. Cale first had them all raise their heads and told them that since they were personally chosen for this place, They must be the elite of their respective positions. He expressed confidence that everyone could handle their duties well, and instructed them to ask Hans if they had any questions in the future. With that, Cale left with Hans. An elderly servant felt a headache coming on, as he had not expected young Master Cale, who was notoriously a good-for-nothing playboy, to act this way, though he just needed to protect him well. Back in the room, Cale tossed a letter onto the table. Hans asked if Cale was going to reply. It was a gathering of nobles from the northeast region. With that, he pulled out a list of nobles who had already arrived in the capital. After reading it, Cale threw the list down. He walked over to the balcony and opened the door. He called out for Noir to come inside. Cale had Hans prepare some food. He told the little dragon that it kept hunting for them, but never got to eat any itself. Noir stared at the food in a daze. The kitten suddenly jumped onto the table and stuffed a piece of food into its mouth. The two little ones were very fond of Noir. Cale thought to himself, "You are going to have a lot of hardships to endure after eating all of this." Cale put down his wine glass, thinking this was truly wonderful. A peaceful life, along with good food and leisurely moments. Being able to get what he wanted was enough. Before Cale could even finish speaking, urgent knocking suddenly echoed from outside the door. Startled, Cale instantly jumped up, accidentally knocking over his wine glass in a panic. The glass shattered on the floor, giving the two little ones another fright. Cale stared at the door, wondering if it could be Choi Han. No, that is not right. He should still be 3 days away from reaching the capital. After all, he cannot forcefully travel with the injured Rocco. Potion treatments have no effect on the wolf tribe anyway. To reach the capital this quickly, they would have to use teleportation magic. And someone as cautious as Claire would never use such a magic draining skill. As he opened the door, the scene before him completely terrified Cale. "Close your eyes and stop struggling." Cale hastily told Noir to stop right there. The dragon said Cale was too weak, so it came to protect him. Cale wore a look of utter astonishment, never expecting it to actually be Choi Han. Choi Han apologized profusely, saying that the only person on his mind was Cale. Cale recognized that the person he was carrying on his back was Rocco of the Blue Wolf tribe. Something is wrong with Rocco's condition. This is clearly a sign of berserk transformation. According to the novel, this state should not happen until a year from now. Cale gives instructions to Hans, then steps closer to observe Rocco more closely. Rocco looks at Cale with a flushed face and gasps for breath. A voice suddenly whispers in his ear, "Stop struggling now. Close your eyes. Hurry up and close your eyes." He tells Rocco to rest easy. Everything will be fine. After saying that, the person runs away. Watching the retreating figure, Rocco recognizes that it was his own uncle. Back in reality, Choi Han asks Cale anxiously, "What is happening to Rocco?" The potion Cale gave him has no effect on Rocco, and he really does not know what to do anymore. He clearly promised to protect Rocco. Cale tells Choi Han to calm down. Since he chose to trust him, he should leave it to him. Seeing the anxious Choi Han, Cale cannot help wondering what actually happened, knowing how deeply emotional and kind Choi Han is in the novel. Yet his changes should have happened gradually. Perhaps because of my own intervention, this part of the plot had changed. Cale looked at the woman beside him. She was Claire, the successor of the Breck kingdom, as well as a genius mage ready to give up her succession rights. Suddenly, Claire felt a massive surge of magic power. A creature appeared before her, casting magic in her direction. It seemed true that the dragons in the novel liked mages. Noir was replenishing her magic power. Cale told it to stop for now. Noir obediently scampered away. Claire was extremely surprised, asking Cale what that was. Cale gestured toward them, saying they should deal with the matter first. She steadied her emotions and asked Cale what was going on with this state. Cale thought to himself that Claire was supposed to be a cautious person in the novel. He never expected that she would actually use high-tier movement magic. The deviation rate was getting higher and higher. Cale asked if, as a mage, she had heard of the wolf tribe's berserk state. Claire said she had read about it in books, but they didn't mention that berserking comes with high fever and pain. Cale explained that since this was Rocco's first time berserking, he would suffer and lose his reason due to the sudden changes in his body. Once he gets through this first transformation, he'll be able to use this state as a weapon. Cale told Hans to quickly prepare a stretcher and carry Rocco to the training grounds. Hans was confused, wondering why a sick person would be taken to a training ground. Cale then called over Choi Han and Claire, telling them to go get beaten up. This left the two of them completely stunned. Cale explained that beast men with the bloodline of fierce beasts are usually helped by their family during their first berserk experience. They have to withstand the attacks of their children after berserk transformation to help the child get through it. Obviously, this child has nobody to help him. Cale clapped his hands and pointed at the two of them. Why do not the two of you act as his mom and dad? Or being older brothers and sisters works too. Cale stated that Rocco has pure bloodlines. Choi Han turned around and said he would definitely protect Rocco well. From now on, he is Rocco's older brother. Then Choi Han and Claire walked over to Rocco together. At that moment, Rocco suddenly began to struggle in pain, growing sharp, long nails on his hands instantly. His eyes changed, with blood-red pupils, entering a completely berserk state. Moore saw the dangerous situation and immediately generated a magic shield, thinking Cale is too strong. No, he is too weak and needs protection. Cale turned to look at them, thinking to himself that these little ones' magic power was getting stronger and stronger. He sat down cross-legged on the ground and asked the two little ones if they had ever experienced berserk mode yet. The two little ones nodded and said they hadn't. Cale then asked if they understood what berserk mode was. The two little ones said they didn't understand, as no one had ever taught them. Feeling a bit worried, Cale told the two little ones that if they felt like they were about to go berserk, or if they suddenly developed a high fever, they must tell him immediately. He thought to himself that if the two little ones caused trouble, it would be his responsibility. The two little ones immediately rushed up to nuzzle Cale affectionately. Next episode preview. Cale pets the gray cat, making sure they remember the signs of berserk mode. Moore the black dragon sighed, claiming that as a dragon, he could do anything. Cale then went to find Choi Han to chat. Cale looked at the berserk Rocco. In the novel, his first time going berserk was supposed to be. The cause was the death of Sherritt. That scene reminded Rocco of his deceased uncle. Anger drove him into a frenzy. Claire told Rocco to snap out of it. But before she could finish, Rocco leaped up to attack. Choi Han forcefully blocked his bite. He then shouted Rocco's name, trying to wake him up. Cale, watching from the sidelines, complained about the two of them. He felt it would be much faster to just knock Rocco unconscious than to keep shouting. Cale told the two little ones to watch the Wolf Tribe boys' movements closely. He explained that Rocco's attacks were now driven by pure beastman instinct. This is exactly what makes beastmen so formidable. Even though you're not the same race as them, you little kitty, Cale added. He wanted them to learn how to defeat beastmen like wolves and bears. After missing his strike, Rocco quickly rushed toward Choi Han again. Claire used her magic to block the attack. She asked Rocco if he still remembered his big sister. She reminded him that they had agreed to be family. Choi Han took the opportunity to create some distance. He shouted for Rocco to attack him instead. Cale told Moore to watch closely. He wanted him to see how Claire could use magic without hurting anyone. Choi Han watched how carefully the boy used his aura to protect him without causing harm. Moore sighed that dragons were almighty and could do anything. Cale told him that since he was a dragon, he would learn it in no time. 2 hours later, Rocco finally regained his sanity. He panted heavily and said, "Brother, sister, I am sorry," and then blacked out and collapsed. Seeing this, Choi Han ran over and picked him up. With his vision blurring, Rocco was losing consciousness. He blinked slightly and softly called Cale uncle. Then he closed his eyes and passed out completely. Cale squatted down and gently patted Rocco on the head, telling him he could rest well now. He asked Leon and Hans to take care of Rocco, while he went to talk with Choi Han about what had just happened. Back in Cale's room, Choi Han explained that everything went smoothly until he met Claire. The guards of the merchant group happened to get injured at the time, so he planned to recruit a couple of shield users. Among those people, Choi Han found Claire as Cale had described. Claire had originally planned to cross the Roan Kingdom and head to the magic tower in the neighboring kingdom. However, before they even left the kingdom, they were ambushed by assassins. She wanted to escape. On the way back to the capital, Choi Han and Claire became good friends. Hearing about his good friend, Cale was a bit surprised. Choi Han said that since they were traveling together, would it not be better to make friends? Cale thought it would be better to keep to himself. He thought about the original story, where Claire had high vigilance and would not easily get close to people. Choi Han also, after experiencing the Harris Village incident, was reluctant to approach others. He smiled and said it did not quite look like him. Yet he just wanted to earn a good living. The merchant guild stayed near the village Choi Han was heading to for a while. One day, Choi Han went with the merchant guild to that village. And that was when the event Cale mentioned happened. As they neared the village, Choi Han learned that their bodyguards were also beast people. The people there had originally arranged to trade with the merchant guild not far from the village. Yet the entire merchant guild waited there until sunset, without seeing the people they agreed to meet. The merchant guild members said they needed to check the village, because they were somewhat worried about it. The three of them went to the village to take a look, and saw a shocking sight. Fires were burning everywhere in the village. Villagers' bodies lay scattered on the ground. A familiar emblem caught his eye. It was the star symbol from the clothing worn by those who had previously tried to capture Noir alongside Cale. Cale was quite surprised. According to the novel, this should have been the work of a mysterious organization. Cale asked Choi Han if they had killed everyone. Choi Han said no, explaining that those people had only wanted to kidnap the children in the village. Cale wondered why they would want to capture young wolf people. Choi Han continued, saying that when those men tried to take the children away, a young man suddenly appeared to block their path. That person was Rocco. Hearing this made Cale even more baffled. In the original story, Rocco was supposed to hide until the very end, watching the villagers wiped out. What on earth had caused his personality to change so drastically? The events of the original plot had changed by this much. Even the second half is entirely different now. It is simply making matters worse. Preview for the next episode. Cale says he plans to tell Choi Han the truth here, even if it means risking his own life. Choi Han says those people are using the power of darkness. They are clearly the same group that attacked the Harris village. Only one of them has that star symbol on their chest. When Choi Han arrives on the scene, he happens to see that person drinking the blood of the wolf tribe members. Cale thinks to himself, is that not the bloodthirsty mage? He was the one who orchestrated the capital attack incident in the novel. That was also supposed to be his very first appearance. Yet now his first appearance has somehow shifted to the village of the Blue Wolf tribe. Why did he change? Why did he kidnap the children of the wolf tribe? Could it be because I rescued Noir? Everyone captured by Choi Han commits suicide on the spot. The rest are all teleported away by that mage. As he leaves, the man remarks what a pity it is. Those children were the best seeds of all. Choi Han says after saving those people, Claire uses teleportation magic to send them and the merchants here together. Cale thought about the wolf tribe kids, wondering if they were treating them like zoo animals. Cale sighed, knowing Choi Han must be full of questions. He knew Choi Han was wondering who those men in black were and why they did such things. He also knew Choi Han wanted to know how Cale found out about their movements in the first place. Cale stood up and told Choi Han that he would explain two things and asked him to come along to the temple of the god of death. Soon, the two of them took a carriage to the temple. Cale said that to clear away Choi Han's doubts, he would tell him the truth right here, even wagering his own life. They found the priest inside the chamber of the god of death. The priest did not speak at first, just staring intently. Dressed in dirty clothes, he looked like someone who had been through a lot of suffering and gave off the impression of an easygoing, honest man. The priest asked whose life was on the line. Cale pointed at himself. Choi Han stepped closer to Cale, telling him that he would believe whatever Cale said. Cale smiled and replied that Choi Han would not believe him after all, because Cale had no intention of revealing the truth about the mysterious organization, sparing Choi Han from the troubles awaiting him in the future. Cale didn't want to be dragged into it. Upon arriving inside the temple, the priest prepared to assist them. Cale suggested they settle a few things first. This was the first of two things he wanted to tell Choi Han. He admitted that he didn't actually know the true identity or purpose of that organization. This left Choi Han a bit surprised. It didn't seem to make much sense. Just then, the priest opened the door. He wanted them to show the priest that they were willing to bet their lives. Cale said he understood why Choi Han would find it hard to believe. After the two entered the room, Cale raised his left hand. The priest pointed to a piece of paper on the table. The two picked up the paper. It read that once someone bets their life, the hand of death will touch both parties. At that moment, one can make an oath. If the person who swore the oath violates it, the punishment will be death. Cale thought what was written there was quite terrifying. Then, the priest began to cast magic, binding the two of them together using the power of the god of death. Cale told Choi Han that he would speak the truth before the god who rests in eternal peace. He told him that he was just an ordinary person who transmigrated into a novel. Because he had only read half of the novel before transmigrating, his knowledge of the plot was limited. He only wanted to live a good life in a chaotic world torn apart by war, which was why he had intervened in the original plot. Cale closed his eyes. He did not want to get dragged into the war. Therefore, Cale spoke up. First, he truly did not know the true identity of that organization. Second, I hate them. So I hope they disappear from this world entirely. Choi Han asked Cale in return, if you do not even know who they are, why would you hate them so much? Cale replied that it was because he knew the evil deeds those people had done. He was just a thug. Because that was his dream, and he didn't want to inherit the family business. Back then, his family sent him to the capital, and he had originally intended to just live his own life. But he stayed because he learned that a certain organization was planning an attack on the capital that would kill countless people. That's why he couldn't let his younger brother, Basin, come here. He wanted to stop the attack discreetly. Choi Han asked Cale if he really couldn't reveal how he knew all this. Cale replied that he couldn't tell anyone in the world. Cale then added that he would never harm Choi Han. Choi Han lowered his head in thought for a moment, then said he chose to believe Cale. However, he wanted Cale to make an oath so that he could trust him completely. Hearing this, Cale actually took an oath. Choi Han said he wanted to get revenge on that organization. So he asked Cale to tell him the moment he found out who they were. Cale sighed, thinking it was that simple. What kind of oath should he make? So he immediately agreed. Cale asked Choi Han. And Choi Han replied. When it was done, Cale placed his hand on the table. Back in the carriage, Choi Han brought up that crazy mage, asking Cale if he could kill that person, if they ever met again. Cale told him not to ask and do whatever he wanted. Choi Han decided that he would definitely get rid of him. The old man actually told Cale he had a favor to ask. Cale held Leon's hand and happily said no problem. If they crossed the western continent, things were going to get troublesome. Someone knocked on Cale's door, and Cale told them to come in. The visitor was the butler Leon, carrying a cup of tea. Leon placed the tea on the table and told Cale to drink it before going to sleep. Without any nonsense, Cale picked it up and drank it right away. He set down his teacup and said in disbelief, "What, please?" Thinking to himself, "Did he actually ask me that because something came up?" Cale told Leon to speak his mind. Leon smiled and raised his hand, asking Cale if he could take a 2-day leave. Cale thought, did the sun rise from the west today? He immediately stepped forward to grab Leon's hand, saying of course he could. Considering how long Leon had taken care of a punk like him all these years, he could take as much time off as he wanted this time. Go get some rest. Though in his heart he hoped Leon would just rest forever. He had to come back before the incident, so a 2-day leave was just right. Cale suddenly turned around and told Leon to wait a moment. He opened a drawer to grab a bag of things and handed it over to Leon. "There is not much money in here," he said. "To enjoy some good food and fun." Leon looked at the money bag in his hand. For all these years, he had stayed quietly by this young master's side, biding his time. Now, the silence was finally broken. If they let those people cross the continent, it would spell huge trouble. Leon smiled and asked Cale if he could really do this. Cale told him of course he could, and that he had full qualification for it. Leon had originally planned to slip away quietly with B-Crocs in a few days, but he came to ask for leave simply out of curiosity to see how Cale would react. Choi Han had clearly already told him what I am. Leon smiled and said this was way too much money. Weren't they afraid he would just run away with it? Or was young Master Cale actually hoping he would leave immediately? Cale looked utterly unbothered, saying that if he really left, it would either mean he was going to finish the job. After all, Cale had read the original story, and Leon's personality in the novel was just like this. Leon's expression seemed. He nodded and said, "Young master." He thought to himself that it was like watching by the young master's side all this time. The young master had watched him grow old just the same. He probably understood him better than his own son did. Leon continued speaking. He offered to escort Cale into the palace. Cale told him whatever. He bowed and said he would head out first. He thought to himself, how could anyone look down on the royalty and nobles here? After all, this was the young master puppy he had raised with his own hands. The next morning, someone knocked on Cale's door once again. Cale was somewhat puzzled. Shouldn't Leon have left by now? He told the person outside to come in. Hans walked in carrying a cup of tea. He cheerfully greeted Cale. He added that Leon had instructed him to take good care of the young master before leaving. He handed the tea to Cale, saying that he himself was still quite important after all. Cale told him to shut his mouth. He raised his head and stared at that cup of tea. This was what Leon had asked him to. Hans said that Leon prepared this tea for the young master. Cale picked it up and started drinking. He wondered why that old man always made him drink lemon tea. At that moment, Choi Han also came to Cale's room. Cale suddenly remembered Leon telling him last night that he was leaving. Choi Han asked him where he was going. Choi Han asked Leon if he came to see him because of young Master Cale. Leon just walked away directly. He told Choi Han to think whatever he wanted. Cale put on his clothes, asking if he was awake yet. He asked Choi Han, who confirmed that he was awake. Cale told him to sit down. He wondered just how strong the recovery power of the wolf tribe was. Before long, the illegitimate son of the merchant group, their little piggy bank Billows, would also be arriving in the capital. He needed to return the things he had borrowed earlier and build a connection with him there. Cale asked how the children and merchants staying at the inn were doing. Choi Han said he planned to visit the inn together after Cale's gathering ended. Cale turned his head to the side. Hans quickly approached and whispered a reminder to Cale that it was the gathering for the noble children of the Northeast region, and the invitations had just been sent out yesterday. Cale had almost forgotten about it. He realized he would need to act the part of a slacker to fit in there. Hans continued, "Young master, that red-haired mage wants to see you." The red-haired mage must be Claire. She is very perceptive and probably guessed that the one she saw yesterday was a dragon. Hans mentioned that Claire was available whenever and could work around Cale's schedule. Cale told Hans to invite Claire to his room for breakfast. He happened to be hungry himself. Hans agreed. But he also corrected Cale, pointing out that since it was already noon, it should be lunch. Hans happily slipped away, promising to prepare everything carefully. Cale told him to slow down. Then, Cale opened the balcony door. Hans opened the door. A gentle breeze blew inside. Moore stretched lazily in the tree outside. Then it lay down again, watching Cale and Choi Han. Cale thought the little guy had a rather strange personality. It insisted on sleeping in the tree outside the window. Choi Han told Cale to eat slowly while he went to check on Rocco first. Cale remarked that Choi Han and Claire must be taking turns looking after him. Cale immediately snapped that they were not taking care of anyone. And even if things were difficult, they would definitely work hard to study and find a way to crush the wolf tribe. Choi Han said that anyway, with those two cute little guys around. Rocco was indeed quite happy. Cale relaxed. That was good. Choi Han added that he had not told the two brothers that Cale was the one who ordered them brought back. As Cale drank his tea, he thought about what a pure and kind-souled Choi Han truly was. He set down his teacup. Had Choi Han really decided to kill the bloodthirsty mage? Choi Han replied without the slightest hesitation that he had. Cale told him that he knew a way. Choi Han immediately grew excited. Cale continued speaking. He said it would have to wait until after they stopped the attack. Just then, someone knocked on the door. Hans announced that Claire had arrived. Hans opened the door and invited her inside, telling Cale to just call him anytime if he needed anything. Claire told Cale to make himself at home, then reached out to grab some snacks. Noir slapped her paw down on the plate and angrily told Claire to eat her own food, because this was his. After Claire arrived at Cale's room by invitation, Choi Han told Claire he would take his leave first. Once inside the room, Cale looked toward the balcony. He told whoever was there to come in, and a few leaves drifted through the window. Claire looked nervous as she stared ahead and softly asked if that was a dragon, as Cale told Noir on the dining table to reveal himself. Noir immediately dropped his invisibility. He glanced at Claire, then turned to Cale and said he was hungry. Cale smiled and said, "Then let's begin." Claire was incredibly excited to see Noir eating right in front of her. She thought that if she told the people back at the Magic Tower, no one would ever believe her. Claire was truly shocked by the scene. She couldn't believe a dragon would actually choose to be with humans. Noir pointed at Cale and remarked that humans are too weak, and Cale's combat power is practically trash, which is why he's with him. Cale simply agreed. Claire told them it was her honor to share a meal with young Master Cale and Noir. Cale politely told them they could stay as long as they liked. Claire mentioned she had 3 things she was curious about. Since one was already solved, she wanted to ask the young master about the remaining 2. Cale told her to go ahead. Claire asked if he really intended to let them stay. Since she was a mage, she felt that as a noble, Cale should be more cautious. Cale just smiled upon hearing this. Cale says it's fine since they were brought by Choi Han. And with this guy around, he feels completely at ease. Claire then brings up a 3rd point, asking why young Master Cale, a noble, is being so polite to her. Cale notes that the red-haired mage had introduced herself as Claire. "Your Highness is the one who should be polite to me," he says. Claire smiles and says that rumors claim Cale is a thug, but he doesn't seem to be. Cale admits that he is indeed quite famous in that regard. He thinks to himself that Claire is quite shrewd. When she speaks to him as a princess, she calls him you. Claire tells Cale he can just call her by her name, adding that he probably wouldn't want to be associated with the princess anyway. Cale agrees, though he assumes the princess is the one who doesn't want to be associated with him, which is why she's doing this. Claire feels that Cale is lying, and that this is just an excuse. Cale not only has a dragon, and is also a super wealthy young noble. If he wanted to, he definitely could have stopped the princess of the Breck Kingdom from showing up in this country. Claire sets down her wine glass and thanks Cale for not notifying the royal family of Roan. Cale replies that a matter like this obviously requires the person's consent first. He thinks to himself that if the royal family found out, the crown prince would surely barge in here like he discovered prey. Claire says that she truly does not want that, and asks Cale not to notify the royal family, thanking him for letting her stay here for a while. She will handle her own affairs properly, and will not disturb young Master Cale. Cale tells her not to mention it. Claire states that it is only right. Then she reaches out to grab some food, but gets blocked by a paw from Noir. Noir tells Claire to eat her own food, because these belong to it. With that, Noir pulls the plate aside, and looks at Claire with a pitiful face. Seeing this, Cale picks up some food and feeds it to Noir, then tells Claire that the little fellow is only 4 years old. Claire, upon hearing the dragon's surprisingly young age, immediately smiled and said to Noir, "I understand, young dragon lord." Noir ignored her and turned back to continue eating. After lunch outside the Henituse estate, Cale looked annoyed. Choi Han told him that if anything was wrong, he could help him out. Cale told him he did not need to know, while Choi Han silently thought that those noble scions probably knew all about Cale's notorious past. Since they had surely heard tales of the trouble he used to cause, he still needed to be careful during this visit. As for Cale, this count's territory was located in the northeast region, and their family possessed weaker combat strength compared to ordinary houses. However, compared to Henituse, their estate was closer to the capital, so maintaining good relations with their young son seemed like a good idea, as Hans had reminded Cale before departure, mentioning someone named Ellie. Hans once reminded Cale that getting close to Ellie was a good thing, and considering other nobles as well. He advised Cale not to be too obvious about it. Hearing what Hans said, the original Cale must have had a very good relationship with Ellie. However, his own actions had changed many things from the novel. He wondered if it would have any impact on Ellie too. How should he act when he saw them? It turned out he was overthinking it. The person right in front of him was none other than Ellie. He called out Cale's name, saying that no matter what, Cale had always listened to him in the past. He pushed up his glasses and said Cale must find this quite troublesome. The other two people at the table chimed in as well, knowing how much Cale disliked being restricted. Ellie suddenly stood up excitedly, telling Cale not to speak or move, just to sit quietly and not worry about a single thing. They would handle everything for him. Cale was left speechless, never expecting such a lucky break. Preview for next episode. Now within the family. There were only 14 left. Noir suddenly appeared and said, "What about me?" Noir said to Cale. "Do not actually fall asleep." Choi Han offered to carry Cale down on his back. Ellie told Cale not to speak and not to smile during the gathering. Just sit quietly and stay put. Cale replied that he was naturally very good at staying put. Ellie nodded awkwardly, saying that others from the northeast region might look for trouble with Cale. They had attached themselves to others, and now they were acting bold. He just needed to stay put, and Ellie would handle everything else. Cale also knew that this was what he was worried about. Other families had already attached themselves to great nobles. They probably wanted to use this gathering to integrate the entire northeast region and present it to their backers. So he had to be careful this time. Cale completely agreed with that thought. Hearing Cale, Ellie also felt relieved. Ellie knew Cale didn't like doing these things, but this time it was mandatory. Cale only needed to offer a brief greeting, and the other three would handle the rest. After hearing this, Cale raised his glass in a toast and thought to himself. He had been worrying about how to act at the party, so Ellie's suggestion was perfect. Once the conversation with the three of them ended, Cale called for Choi Han. Choi Han reported that everything at the inn was going well, and the children were very lively. Cale said that was great, meaning Choi Han was now free. Choi Han looked confused, but agreed. Cale then asked Choi Han to accompany him on an errand. Just like last time, Cale opened the window and had Choi Han climb inside. Noticing the two little ones were missing, suddenly, Noir appeared out of thin air and reminded them that he was coming along too. Cale confirmed that they would all be going together. Choi Han looked at the black dragon. He asked Cale if it was some kind of object. Cale found it strange that Choi Han would think that way. He told Choi Han that of course it was not. He told him to remember to wear a hat next time. Noir told Cale that he could not really go to sleep yet. Cale thought to himself that the little guy must not think he was only 4 years old too. Hearing movement outside the window, Cale got up and told Noir that it was time to set off. Soon, Choi Han jumped into the room through the window. Cale put on a hat, saying that a cloak was actually more suitable than a hat. Choi Han asked Noir if it intended to follow them looking like that. Noir said it could turn invisible. Choi Han had heard that dragons could also take on human forms, and wondered why it could not turn into a human. Noir replied with a disdainful look, saying that dragons were born handsome and arrogant, so it had no desire to turn into a human. Choi Han was a bit curious about who had told it that dragons were handsome. The black dragon immediately locked its gaze on Cale. Cale calmly stated that dragons were naturally very handsome. Choi Han could only awkwardly agree. As the two walked out to the balcony, Choi Han looked over and asked Cale if he needed to carry him. Cale did not say anything, simply raising a hand and pointing upward. In a moment, he was floating in the air. He said happily, "Dragons are amazing." Noir chimed in, saying, "That is right, I am super cool." Choi Han was quite surprised too. He realized how powerful dragons truly were. Soon, the two of them and Noir headed downstairs. Cale looked at Noir, thinking that this fellow was even stronger than he had imagined. No wonder the original story mentioned that a single adult black dragon could destroy an entire kingdom. However, once he acquired the sound of the wind, he would not need to worry about any of this, nor would he have to drag the two of them around everywhere. He would pick up the sound of the wind on his way back from the capital. He could tell his family that, since he rarely went on such a long journey, he wanted to do some sightseeing along the northeast coast. Then, Cale, Choi Han, and Noir headed toward the plaza. Looking around at everything, Choi Han remarked that the nightlife in the capital was indeed much livelier than anywhere else. Upon reaching the plaza, Cale had Noir isolate them with a soundproofing barrier, and told Choi Han about something called magic bombs. Choi Han had never heard of or seen such a thing. Cale explained that magic bombs came in various forms, and were commonly used weapons in magical warfare across the western continent. They were quite tricky to handle as well. It requires adjusting the mana and finding a suitable spot to install it. However, in just 6 days, this new type of magic bomb will detonate right here. Cale thinks to himself. Because of this change in the original novel's plot, The locations and characters involved in the incident might have changed as well. Just to be safe, they need to find where the bombs are planted as soon as possible. Choi Han asks Cale if it will really explode here. Cale replies that absolutely, the bomb is hidden somewhere. Or perhaps even on someone's person. Choi Han asks what they should do then. And Cale says it is simple. It is essentially just a block of mana. By using the ability to sense mana, they just need to find the areas with high mana density. Choi Han remarks that it does not sound so simple, but Cale looks at Noir and says, "It is simple, right?" Noir agrees, saying it is just a bit troublesome. Cale hands a piece of paper to Choi Han, saying these people should finish installing the bombs 2 days prior. And since this place gathers the most citizens, at least one will be planted here. Cale tells Choi Han and Noir to take this square as the center, to search the capital for bombs every single night. Choi Han asks Cale what they should do after finding them. Cale tells him to just leave them alone once found. Choi Han struggles to understand. He asks Cale why they should not dismantle them as soon as they are found. Cale says with a sly grin, "Do you not want to kill that mage?" Triggering magic bombs requires a mage to be present. Choi Han finally understands Cale's intention. He asks if they only need to patrol during the 2 days before the bombs go off. Cale says no. They also need to sneak over the day before. Choi Han says security will likely be extremely tight the day before. It should be very hard to get in. Cale smiles and takes out the disruption orb. He says with this, everything related to magic will fail. Preview for the next episode, Choi Han turns to look at Cale, wondering why Cale is not going with them. Cale immediately puts on a weak act and says it is cold. Cale asks Hans if his looks and physique are truly. Hans laughs. "Our young master is excellent in every way." Cale realizes he just heard that. Cale takes out the magic disruption orb, thinking that disrupting the bombs for just 10 minutes will be enough. The people from the mysterious organization will definitely stand out by then. Moreover, it will not just be Choi Han and Noir. He still has plenty of humans and beastmen he can command. Choi Han asked Cale if he planned to handle all of this by himself. Before he could finish, Cale interrupted him. Cale said yes, and told Choi Han to get back to work, saying he would wait right here. Just search until 11 tonight. Before leaving, Choi Han wondered why Cale was not coming along. Cale put on a fragile look and complained about the cold. Seeing how weak Cale seemed, Choi Han did not say much more and simply went to work. Cale really had Choi Han completely wrapped around his finger. 2 days later, they had searched for 2 days without finding anything at all. At that moment, a knock came from the door. Cale told him to enter. Leon walked into the room with a smile and told Cale he was back. The moment he saw Leon's face, Cale's drowsiness vanished instantly. Leon also brought Cale a letter. Reading the contents of the letter, Cale suddenly stood up. He asked Leon to pack a bottle of fine red wine for him, thinking that billows from the Flynn Merchant Guild would soon arrive in the capital. This also meant there were only a few days left before meeting the Crown Prince. Leon asked Cale if he remembered they were heading to the royal capital the day after tomorrow. Leon wanted to accompany him as Cale's personal attendant. Cale looked at Leon and asked, who else would go? An organization from the eastern continent known as Darkness was gradually making its way to the western continent. And the heir to the Molan family, one of the 5 great assassin groups of the eastern continent, was none other than Leon. Leon both hated and feared them, and he had come here specifically to escape them. Cale told Leon, of course you're going, but why ask such a strange question? Leon smiled, imagining that young Master Cale would look very handsome in the royal palace. Cale asked Leon to be honest about his looks and physique. Leon replied that Cale was excellent in every way. Cale looked at him with disbelief. Leon then bowed and said he needed to go inform Hans. Cale was a bit surprised. He wondered why Leon had suddenly become so gentle. Maybe he'd gone soft during his vacation. Before leaving, Leon mentioned that a bottle of fine red wine would be a nice touch. Just as Leon stepped out the door, the 2 little ones said they'd found a way. They wanted to find a chance to strike while he was off guard. Cale looked at the 2 of them, not expecting that they were still plotting. Just then, there was another knock at the door. The 2 little ones caught a scent, saying it smelled like a wolf. Cale told Rocco to come in. Rocco pushed the door open and entered, looking quite nervous. This made him even more nervous. He quickly complied. But after sitting down, Rocco didn't say a word. Cale told him there was no need to be nervous. He figured Rocco must have something to say, so he told him to just speak his mind. After hesitating for a long time, Rocco suddenly stood up and said, thank you. Cale looked at Rocco and thought to himself. Rok Soo thought that in the novel, his personality would have changed by now. Why does he still seem exactly the same as before? Cale told him that Rok Soo should indeed thank him. Since it is settled, let us get going. Seeing Rok Soo hesitating and stammering, Cale urged him to speak his mind right away. Startled by Cale's words, Rok Soo looked up at Cale. Cale told him that was much better. People should always look at each other properly when speaking. He told him to say whatever was on his mind now, and he would listen. Rok Soo grew emotional, stating that as an older brother, he had to take care of his younger siblings. On top of being a nephew and a brother, he had to get his revenge. Cale thought to himself that looking after 10 younger siblings must be truly difficult. Moreover, all the tribe members who once cherished him had suffered tragic deaths. Raising his head with a determined look, he asked if it was true that wolves protect their families. Prioritize protecting the home. Rocco thanked Cale for saving him and asked for his help. Cale told him that one thank you was enough. He didn't really want to help Rocco, but he was open to making a deal. He wondered what kind of help Rocco needed and what Rocco could possibly offer in return. He told Rocco to come find him once he had thought it through. Rocco stood up and agreed, saying he would return once he had a plan. Cale patted Rocco on the head and told him he was a good boy. Sometime later, Cale walked toward the building in front of him. This was the Palace of Joy. It was built by the current king to celebrate the birth of the crown prince. No house in the Henituse main city or the royal capital could compare to it. Cale looked toward the gate. Suddenly, a carriage stopped right in front of Cale. Cale thought to himself that this cliché plot was quite old-fashioned. Someone stepped out and walked toward Cale while speaking. Well. Look who we have here. Isn't this our famous young master Cale? Damn it. He just had to run into Vinyan's lackey at a time like this. Moore asked Cale whether they should just kill him. Cale sat back down in his seat. He could feel the little guy shivering slightly. The guy in front of him was Vinyan's lapdog. His name was Nico Toss. The village that previously imprisoned Noir happened to be part of Viscount Toss territory. The Toss family had once tried to get on good terms with the Henituse family. For some unknown reason 5 years ago, they defected to Marquis Stan's faction. Ever since then, this guy had been acting like a fox exploiting a tiger's might. Cale sighed at the bad luck of running into him alone. Nico dismissed his attendants and said he wanted a private word with young Master Cale. As soon as the servants walked away, he suddenly smiled and spoke to Cale. A trash of low quality like you. How could you possibly show up here? Cale felt rather awkward, thinking this guy was truly childish. He used to see this kind of person all the time in television dramas, never expecting to run into one himself. Nico muttered about having Leon wipe him out directly. Seeing Cale frown, Nico asked if he wanted to throw a wine bottle or hit him. Moore pointed at Nico and said that guy had no manners at all. Cale told Noir about Vinyan losing his hand, which only made the little black dragon detest him even more. Cale shook his head and said there was no need to do that. A carriage arrived swiftly and stopped right beside Cale and Nico. The person stepping out belonged to another neutral family from the northeast region. Seeing Ellie arrive, Cale called out to her. He pointed to Nico beside him, and with a grim expression, told Ellie to deal with him quickly. After receiving Cale's thoughts, Ellie cleared her throat and said, "Young Master Nico, it's been a long time." Nico was stunned. He couldn't believe these people were actually protecting a shameless thug. He looked at Cale, who was standing behind Ellie. Cale's gaze and aura suddenly reminded him of Vinyan, which terrified Nico so much that he couldn't utter a single word. Seeing this, Cale remembered that Noir had used magic to record their conversation. Cale smiled, thinking that Nico would soon regret everything. Once Cale left, Ellie smiled and said, "See you at the banquet." The other two went inside as well. They arrived inside the grand hall. Cale thought this place looked decent. Amira moved closer to Cale. The topmost seat belongs to the crown prince. The nobles sit at tables designated by their respective regions. Cale nodded. "Thank you for the explanation, Miss Amiru." He noticed 5 round tables set up in the hall, representing the northeast, central, west, northwest, and southwest and southeast regions. The crown prince in the novel excelled at this. Not only did he cause competition among these nobles, he even placed his own seat higher than the prince's. He really liked obsessing over such useless details. Amira looked somewhat bitter. Seeing their table location, Cale comforted her. Being near the entrance is not necessarily a bad thing. Ellie said emotionally, "How wonderful that someone understands my intentions." Cale was left completely baffled, thinking to himself, what intentions could I possibly have? Right then, someone outside the door suddenly shouted, "Young Master Vinyan of Marquis Stan's estate has arrived." Cale sat down in his assigned seat. As expected, the little guy was feeling scared. Cale reached out to soothe the trembling Noir. Noir insisted he was fine. After all, he belonged to the mighty dragon race. A few days ago, Cale had given Noir strict instructions. They would be meeting Vinyan inside the palace. Noir must not kill him. If Noir agreed to this condition, Cale promised to help him with something in return. When the time was right, Cale would grind Vinyan to dust. The little guy was certainly good at holding back his anger. Otherwise, a rampage would have destroyed this entire palace and ruined his own life in the process. What should I do? I might as well just pretend I do not know him. Right then, a voice came from behind. Young Master Cale. Long time no see. I heard that Viscount Toss territory. Viscount Toss. Important things. All of you who will become the pillars of the kingdom in the future can come to attend the banquet. I am extremely happy. Watching the drama from the side is quite interesting too. Even though I planned to pretend not to know Cale, he actually took the initiative to say hello. Cale quickly stood up and spoke with a joyful expression. If it is not young Master Vinian. We met last time at Viscount Toss territory. This is actually the first time we meet here. Vinian kept a smile. Back then he was visiting his good friend Nico and heading home. Cale mentioned that specific encounter and even agreed to grab a drink together in the capital. Vinian agreed. But Nico looked worried. Cale had a mischievous smirk, ready to stir the pot. He mentioned that people from the Toss family had come looking for him. Apparently, their villa had been completely looted. He wondered how things were faring now. Cale mentioned he had some wine that night. He was shocked to hear the news this morning. Cheer up, young Master Nico. Life is full of frustrating little setbacks. Cale really hated malicious people who lacked discernment. Now he had everything. He opened his arms wide and suggested that when you're dealing with something upsetting, you should have a drink to ease the sorrow. Why don't we just drink until we pass out today? It just happened that Cale lived nearby. Therefore, he could not help but suspect him. Yet upon second thought, a brainless, good-for-nothing young master. How could he possibly manage to steal the Black Dragon? He smiled and expressed his gratitude for the invitation, saying they should do it another time. With that, Vinian turned around and left, while Nico kept adding fuel to the fire behind him. They should have taken precautions earlier. Their awareness was simply too weak, giving bad actors an opening. However, the item was already stolen. Since they could not find it back, what else could they do? Vinian thought to himself, where on earth did that crazy bastard and the little dragon go? Cale told Nico to pull himself together on the surface, while thinking to himself, now let Vinian properly teach you a lesson. Afterward, Cale intended to drink some alcohol. The nobles had arrived one after another, filling the room. Just then, someone else entered the banquet hall. He raised his hand to signal his attendant to remain silent. He soon took the main seat. Cale checked his pocket watch, thinking they should be arriving soon as well. You are all precious jewels who will illuminate the kingdom. He expressed his great delight that everyone destined for greatness could attend. At that moment, the doors of the banquet hall opened again. Everyone looked over in confusion, wondering if all the invited guests had already arrived. Cale looked toward the entrance with a mischievous grin, thinking they finally made it. What a fitting time indeed. Cage continued pushing Taylor forward into the room. The surroundings instantly filled with loud whispering and murmurs. Vinian abruptly stood up upon seeing them, demanding angrily what on earth was going on. The Crown Prince looked on with a delighted expression, never expecting to see Marquis stand here, along with a priest of the god of death. It was a great opportunity for the nobles to meet the Crown Prince. That is why he didn't dare come without an invitation. The Crown Prince said he understood. He admitted that he had indeed asked every family to send a representative to the banquet. However, if a family didn't have a representative, anyone from the family can come. He does not need an invitation. This really breaks the heart of young Master Taylor. So, the Crown Prince's words were purely mockery. In the original novel, the Crown Prince at this time was constantly worried about being replaced. Marquis Stan's estate was closely monitoring things at this moment. However, no matter how favored he was, not to mention other nobles also had their own factions they wanted to support. It was truly strange. For a long, long time, Taylor's legs had gotten stronger. The Crown Prince said that was right. Vinian thought to himself, indeed, the ones who survive until the end. Watching the drama unfold felt quite interesting. With the Crown Prince, Taylor, Vinian, and everyone else. If only he could have a bag of melon seeds. It would be even better to eat snacks while watching them have a dinner party. The Crown Prince wondered where he should have them sit. He looked toward Cale and asked about the table. Cale thought it would be best to seat Taylor at that particular table. His decision made complete sense. After all, that table was the only neutral faction present without any major nobles. The Crown Prince arranged for Taylor and his companion to sit at the Northeast region table. It also happened to have much more space than the other areas. The two of them expressed their deep gratitude to the Crown Prince for the arrangement. The attendant pointed out the seating for them. The banquet table was cleared and rearranged. Ellie was worried that Cale might get upset. She warned him specifically not to cause any trouble. The attendants quickly finished clearing the luxurious dining table. Everyone took their seats once again. Taylor expressed how glad he was to meet everyone, continuing what he was saying before, gathering together for a meal, thanking everyone for attending his banquet. As the banquet officially started, Cale wondered what the Crown Prince was really planning, simply inviting them all out to eat. Could it be related to the upcoming war in the southern western continent? Or had they figured out that the Whipper Kingdom was on the verge of civil war? Amiru told Cale. We should go greet the Crown Prince now. Cale nodded in agreement. And all the members of the neutral factions stood up, heading toward where the Crown Prince was located, looking exceptionally delighted. Isn't this our talented person from the Northeast region? Warning, Cale is going to die. Choi-han said out of breath. He had discovered 4 magic bombs. Rocco laughed and said, That is enough, it tickles. The Crown Prince from the novel has finally made his appearance. The 4 members of the Northeast region family stepped forward to pay their respects to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince looked overjoyed to see them. Legend says that golden hair is proof of the sun god's protection, and also a symbol of the royal family's rule. He told Ellie that he wanted to chat after the banquet. Hearing that the prince wanted to speak with him, Ellie replied that it was his great opportunity. Bearing such a heavy responsibility as a leader of his clan, he was eager to discuss things further. Cale thought to himself, Here he goes, starting to show off his eloquence. After praising Ellie, the prince turned his attention to Cale. He addressed Cale as the young master of the Henituse earldom, saying the kingdom did not need to worry about the darkness force thanks to them. He remarked on Cale's free-spirited personality, attributing it to the artistic atmosphere of the Henituse territory. It must be the local artistic atmosphere of Henituse at work. He figured that the freer a person's soul, the purer it was. Cale thought to himself, that praising a good-for-nothing punk from this angle was no simple task. The Crown Prince was truly something else. Cale grabbed his hand and said, that meeting the Crown Prince today made him realize that a star like Highness shines as a beacon in the night. Getting to gaze upon the Crown Prince's visage today would make him too moved to sleep tonight. Cale chuckled evilly, thinking that the Crown Prince in the original story loathed people who acted just like him. Step 1 of the plan to stay away from the Crown Prince was a success. Just then, Noor suddenly issued a warning to Cale. That person's hair and eye color were altered by magic. He said, I will die if I am not careful. Cale is confused upon hearing Noor say that. Many characters in the original story said his strength was very ordinary. The Crown Prince is born from a common consort. She used to be a palace maid. This might have something to do with the time the Crown Prince almost lost his life as a child. What is he hiding underneath all this? The Crown Prince says Cale is a lot like him. Cale replies that it is his honor. He continues to bow and guess further. Could it be because he is the king's biological son? Or is there some other secret? Cale regrets thinking about this so much. His useless knowledge has increased once again. He takes the initiative to strike up a conversation. Amiru says yes. It looks like a coastal cliff cut down by a sword. It's that place that looks like the severed coastal cliff. In the original story, this power was obtained by someone known as the Mage Slayer. This person only appears during the latter half of the Civil War in the Weber Kingdom. Once the Civil War in the Weber Kingdom ends, the Magic Tower will collapse. And the person most likely to become the new master of the Magic Tower in the Western continent is Claire. Choi-han, the Mage Slayer, and the Crown Prince of the Rowan Kingdom are all closely tied to the events in the north-central Western continent. The Jungle King of the southern Western continent will also clash with them. It will become a battlefield, a struggle for power. Cale asked Gilbert if he could leave immediately after the banquet. Gilbert replied that they were scheduled to meet the Crown Prince after the banquet. He asked if Cale planned to come along. Cale felt it wasn't necessary, as he already knew the situation better. Gilbert was quite surprised. He couldn't believe Cale had actually read the documents. At this birthday anniversary event, the Crown Prince has prepared something for everyone, hoping they can all share in the celebration. The banquet for today ends here. Cale wondered how to get everyone to that explosion site. Just then, Taylor passed by Cale. He told Cale, see you later, little brother. Cale watched them leave, thinking, who exactly is your little brother? Cale called for Amiru, who said she wanted to see him out. Cale asked Amiru if she was worried that he would cause trouble on the way back. Amiru replied, what a shame. It's a pity young Master Nico already left. Cale figured she was probably worried that Nico would pick a fight outside. She added, yes. We must secure a good outcome for the territory. In the novel, the coast of the Northeast region was a completely useless place. Not only were the cliffs steep, but there were also whirlpools in the sea. Only a few people were capable of navigating ships through those waters. And those whirlpools were actually caused by the ancient power. Amiru said with a smile that she believed it would definitely turn out well. Cale thought to himself that since it was in the Northeast region, he turned around and said, instead of focusing on local sightseeing projects, why not think about the value of the territory's coast? Within the Weber Kingdom and the Northern Kingdom? Amiru said she would remember those words. Then, Cale entered the carriage and told Leon, the banquet is over, let's head back. Tourism is only needed during times of peace. But the Crown Prince knew that peace was about to end. In short, they had to act before the bloodthirsty mage arrived. After returning home, Choi-han found Cale, out of breath, saying he had discovered 4 magic bombs, and they were all located in the plaza. Cale took a map from Choi Han to examine it. Choi Han said that after finding one, he searched the surrounding area while holding Noir. As it turned out, as Cale found 3 more, he wondered to himself that the original novel stated there were 5 on people and 5 in the venue. Could it be because of his intervention that they changed it to 6 on people? Or perhaps there will be even more variables. That is enough, little Hong. It tickles. I never expected young Master Cale to know Billows. What kind of trouble are you causing with the things you borrowed from us? Cale explained that the celebration is the day after tomorrow, and it is still safe before then, so there is no need to rush. Choi Han asked with some surprise. Why not destroy such dangerous things earlier? Cale believed this matter could only be done on the day itself. If the bombs were destroyed in advance, the bloodthirsty mage would find out, and they might make more bombs, or prepare other means. Besides, those bombs are very useful, just in case they need to keep searching. They have to make sure the number and location of the magic bombs remain unchanged. They ask everyone to help out. When the festival draws near, Cale receives word. Billows has already arrived in the capital. Before heading out, Rocco comes to find Cale. He says his condition is for Cale to take care of his younger siblings. In exchange, he and his siblings will work for Cale. He mentions that the Blue Wolf tribe used to be a famous knight order in history. Cale turns his head. He replies that he has no use for such history. Asking him to take these kids and form a knight order is something he cannot do. Cale continues. Rocco clearly just begged him to protect those children. So why is he suddenly trying to make them join a knight order? Isn't this condition contradictory? What do those children actually want? Are you going to make decisions for them? Hearing Cale's words, Rocco lowers his head and apologizes. Cale says there is no need to apologize. He already knows what Rocco wants to ask of him. As for what to use as payment, Cale will let him know once he figures it out. Cale thought to himself. He already had the conditions in mind. As for after a month, there was a very valuable ancient power. Berserked werewolves were heading over. Cale planned to take it from the Jungle Queen and sell it, so that even if the estate went bankrupt one day, the money he earned would be enough to live on comfortably. Rocco replied that whatever conditions Cale proposed, he would do his absolute best to fulfill them. Cale pulled something out, saying he had heard about the younger siblings. They should go explore the capital together. Buying some delicious treats with the 2 little ones would also prevent them from getting lost. Hearing about going shopping and getting good food, the 2 little ones were thrilled. Cale thought to himself that he needed to pick a nanny for the wolf children. Someone clean who was good at cooking. And B. Crox's image suddenly popped into his head. He immediately dismissed the idea. B. Crox was a maniac who loved torture and interrogation. He could not let B. Crox ruin the innocent nature of the young wolves. Rocco opened the door. His younger siblings were hiding right here. Seeing Rocco arrive, the children immediately ran over and hugged him. They were overjoyed. At that moment, Billows also arrived. He called out young master. Cale smiled and said, "It has been a while, Billows." The person next to him stepped forward, saying, "It is an honor to meet young Master Cale for the first time." He was the owner of the trading guild who came with them. "It is a great pleasure to meet young Master Cale." Cale extended his right hand and replied, "There is no need for such formality. What is so honorable about meeting a good-for-nothing trash anyway?" The guild owner introduced himself as Odious Flynn. Cale recalled the contents of the novel. Odious had once been the most promising successor to the Flynn Trading Guild, yet he gave up his right to inherit. Instead, he created a small trading guild to run on his own. He was actually Billows' uncle. He was the one who pulled strings to connect Choi Han and Billows. He is far more cunning than Leon. He pretends to run a modest merchant guild, but he actually has other motives. To certain people, he is kind. To others, however, he is unforgivable. Cale smiled and said, "So you are a member of Billows' family. It is a pleasure to meet you." Odessa replied that he was quite surprised as well. He never expected young Master Cale to know Billows. He only met Billows a few times when the boy was very young. He added that he was delighted to see Billows again. Billows wore a strange expression, thinking that Odessa was the only person with a good impression left from his childhood memories. Cale suggested that they head upstairs for a drink and catch up once the others arrived. Odessa expressed hope that they could share a drink together again in the future. Cale replied that the opportunity would come very soon. We should still find an instructor to lead them. Billows looked down at the children below and asked Cale what on earth he was doing. Cale replied, what else could he be doing? Naturally, he was preparing for a peaceful and leisurely retirement. Hearing this, Billows was left somewhat speechless. He walked over, sat down next to Cale, opened a bottle of red wine, and poured himself a glass. He took a large gulp, drinking heavily on his own. Cale asked if Billows was pretending not to see him. Billows apologized, saying he was simply too troubled. Cale motioned to him, even though he did not know what was bothering Billows. How could anyone drink good wine all by themselves? Billows handed the bottle over and told Cale that Otis was actually his biological uncle. As someone who could not even carry the Flynn family name in the story, Billows had not even dared to call his own uncle by that title. Yet Otis had once told Billows that he was his nephew and also his family. Those words had become the catalyst for his awakening. After following Choi Han, Billows threw himself into the fight to become the merchant group heir. Billows asked Cale if he was curious. Otis clearly had a family name, yet chose to leave the merchant group. Cale replied, "Why would I be curious? He and Otis are both members of the Flynn family." Billows lowered his head and said, "But I am just a concubine-born son, I am afraid." Cale sighed. A concubine-born son is still a member of the Flynn family. Everyone already treats you as part of the Flynn family. Billows smiled, saying that Cale always manages to say things that make complete sense. Cale smiled and said, "It really does seem that way." Billows took the drink handed over by Cale and asked, "So young Master Cale, what kind of trouble are you causing with the things you took from me?" Cale said he had already stolen it and was moving on to the next target. Billows asked if he could join in as well. Cale said the spots were already full. Billows replied that he would just have to go steal something else instead, and then both of them laughed together. In the next preview, Leon smiled faintly, thinking to himself that he was the real bastard after all. Cale said he was too weak, and going would only slow them down. Cale chuckled to himself, thinking that building a house on a coastal cliff to spend his retirement would actually be pretty nice. After returning home from the inn, Leon sought out Cale. He asked Cale to take care of his son. Cale was baffled. Why was he suddenly making such a request? Leon replied that the young master had known he was an assassin all along. Cale simply looked at him in silent confirmation and asked what of it. Leon said that as an assassin, he was going to hunt down those foxes. Cale thought to himself that Choi Han and the others did not really need Leon right now, especially with Rocco, who could go berserk. After pondering for a moment, Cale told him to go ahead. He added that Leon should come back and report later, and to just take whatever money he needed. Cale lay back down and said, "Let us leave it at that." His vacation period was set for a year. He wished him a safe journey and told him not to get hurt. Hearing Cale's words, Leon suddenly burst out laughing. He thought he took this little fellow for a jerk, only to realize that he himself was the real jerk. Leon asked if he could report once a month. Cale told him to do whatever he wanted. Afterward, Leon closed the door and left. Cale thought to himself that he really was an assassin, walking without making a single sound. Midnight arrived. The others were already gathered in Cale's room. Cale remarked that brown hair really suited Claire. Claire touched her hair, saying that this way she could run around without any worries. Wondering about today's business, she had decided to come and help as soon as she heard about the magic bomb. Cale asked Rocco if he could use the wolf power berserk state. Getting a confirmation, Cale paired Claire and Rocco together, while Choi Han and Noir formed the other group. The two teams split up to take action. Claire asked Cale what he would be doing. Choi Han answered with an awkward expression. Noir sighed, saying his body was a bit weak, and quickly added that he was just too weak. The little ones shook their heads as well, saying he was useless and not needed. Soon, all eyes turned to Cale. Cale agreed, saying that someone as weak as him would just drag everyone down. He handed a bag to Choi Han, explaining that he had to attend an event at dawn and could not join them. Afterward, Cale went over the mission details once more. They were to infiltrate during the Capital Guard shift change, disarm the bombs, and activate the confusion spheres to jam the mana. Everyone would return to their assigned positions and keep a close eye on the mysterious organization. The celebration speech was set to begin at 9 a.m. With that, he told everyone to get to work. Claire asked Cale if he still remembered to give her the magic bomb. Cale replied of course. Claire smiled and said it could count as her pay for today's work. Soon, the group left together through the balcony. Cale closed the balcony door behind them. He began to summon the indestructible shield. A materialized shield appeared right before him, hoping it comes in handy. Cale thought he would not be so unlucky as to run into that bloodthirsty mage. Morning arrived. Cale told Leon that today would be the last time he served as his attendant. Leon looked at Cale and told the young master not to worry, saying he would return to serve him in a year. Return in a year, Cale thought to himself. In a year, I am sending you straight to Choi Han on the carriage ride to the banquet venue. Cale smiled and said, Amiru must have already figured it out by now. Amiru admitted it was true, but because this matter was beyond her control, she had already contacted the head of the house and intended to discuss it with Gilbert today. Cale thought that letting the royal family station troops there would not be an easy task, as it could easily cause regional tension. However, that was the only place in the eastern part of the kingdom with access to the sea, and the nobles of the northeast region were too evenly matched in power. Cale understood the situation completely. Amiru is worried about the royal family growing stronger within the royal territory. Cale points out that the funds of Henituse can only be allocated by his father the Count, and a mere punk like him has no final say. Cale thinks that building a base with the royal family inside a noble's territory would inevitably lead to detailed agreements regarding leadership and actual control. The royal family might agree to build a base on the northeast coast and invest a huge amount of money. However, once that happens, the leadership of the base would naturally fall into the hands of the royal family. This is because the investment in the base far exceeds the tourism project proposed by the northeastern faction. The territories of Amiru and Gilbert are very close to each other, and they simply do not have the resources to compete with the royal family for control. Therefore, if they want to prevent this from happening, they have no choice but to borrow money from someone wealthy. Amiru smiles and asks if that is really the case. From her conversation with the crown prince, she fully senses his deep wariness. Your Highness. Cale thought to himself that the royal family had clearly known about the signs of civil war in the Roan kingdom all along. What surprised Cale the most, however, was Amiru's family. Even though their situation was already quite bad, they had actually spent a heavy amount of money to buy intelligence regarding this matter. Cale really appreciated such willingness to invest. Amiru mentioned formally contacting the Henituse Duchy's estate, and Cale believed that if a naval base could be established in the northeast region, the base would not only boost the territory's military strength, but also provide much greater support out on the sea. Amiru added that those swirling currents could also serve as a very good defense against invading enemies. Cale chuckled to himself, thinking that those whirlpools did not need to be worried about, since they were going to disappear very soon anyway. That being said, the sea cliffs in the northeast region were really quite nice. After all, if I leave the territory to Basin, I will not be able to live within the proper territory anymore. I can just find a place to hide during the war, and once it ends, build a villa in the territories of Amiru and Gilbert, facing the ocean. Ah, that is truly. I am so surprised. Good grief, how could this be? Young Master Cale, let me tell you. There is a very interesting story about my legs. The people in the square raised their heads to look above, discussing what that thing could be. Cale thought, damn it. He is about to reach his limit. Noir roared at Cale, saying that if Cale died, he would slaughter everyone here. He would destroy everything, and then die himself. If you cannot wait, you can check out the official manga for the continuation. The third season has already started serialization. The source of the manga is in the comments. I hope you enjoy my recap. Cale. He even thought about what to do after the war ended. He wanted to build a villa by the sea in Amiru's territory, and live facing the ocean from then on. Soon after, the two of them arrived at the plaza for this event. Cale took out his pocket watch to check the time. It was exactly 8 o'clock. The staff members would all enter before 7. Once it hit 8:30, the knight's order would restrict exits. By then, they could start the game of finding the magic bombs. Choi Han and the others should be able to track those people down. Worried, Ellie found Cale and urged him to stay put. She turned around, only to be shocked by the scene before her. Ellie said in astonishment, how could something like this happen? At that moment, Noir arrived by Cale's side, saying that the bombs are currently being dismantled. It will probably finish around 8:55. Before leaving, Noir gently patted Cale on the head, reminding him to use that shield if he was afraid of pain. Cale thought to himself, I suppose I will have to use the indestructible shield. After reassigning the carriages, the crown prince instructed his subordinates to set off. Cale was slightly puzzled looking at the people sitting inside the carriage. He wondered what the crown prince was up to, actually arranging for Taylor and Nico to be in this carriage. That guy is probably in absolute chaos right now. As for our villain Vinian, his expression was extremely unsightly. After all, seeing the disabled eldest son abandoned by his family not only completely recovered, but he was also strongly supporting Crown Prince Alberu. At that moment, Amir suddenly asked if Taylor's legs had completely recovered. Taylor replied that thankfully, blessed by the heavens, he had fully recovered now. Following their conversation, Nico also chimed in to ask Taylor, will young Master Taylor be returning to the Marquisate after your recovery? Taylor responded, what do you mean by returning? That place was always my home to begin with. Is there even a place for me in that house? Taylor leaves Nico completely speechless with that remark. He turns his head to look straight at Cale. Cale lets out a sigh, reading the exact words Taylor wants to say right from his eyes. Cale, let me tell you something. The story behind my legs is actually very interesting. Not long after, Nico and Amiru board their carriage and leave. Taylor explains that he healed his legs on the condition of becoming the next head of the Marquisate. Cale asks if he had to swear his loyalty in return. Taylor replies that he did not, as he only made a deal with the Crown Prince. Cale smiles and nods, saying that is wonderful, and congratulating him on his recovery. Taylor searches through his pockets and says this is the content of the deal. Cale takes the slip of paper and asks why he is giving this to him. Taylor answers that knowing this will benefit Cale. Cage is about to be expelled from the church. Cale asks why. Is it because she always works alone? Taylor says yes. She was so happy to hear it. Cale thinks that is great. That way Cage can embark on the path of a crazy priestess. Taylor asks Cale. It is just the beginning. But we are going to win, right? Cale feels somewhat speechless. Why is he including himself in the word we? When Taylor gets off the carriage, Cale says to him, we will win. Hearing Cale say that makes Taylor very happy. Cale says sure. The red wine of Henituse is really good. There is plenty of it. When the carriage starts moving again, Cale opens the note. The note says the Crown Prince wants to avoid civil war. Seeing this content makes Cale a bit annoyed. Because the Crown Prince actually knows about the impending civil war, meaning his background is really not simple. Someone finds Cale and says to Cale that it is time for them to enter the stage. In the original novel, Choi Han held a status higher than ordinary commoners. Compared to royalty or bureaucratic nobles, he was still at the bottom. Cale raised his head to look at the clock in the square. It was 8:25. This was the entrance time for nobles and ministers, and also when they started restricting commoners from entering. Gilbert asked if it was an honor. Cale said yes. Carriage after carriage entered one by one. I did not expect this road to be so wide. Cale looked around as he spoke. He saw Rocco waving a flag in the distance. Cale knew the plan was still going quite smoothly. He looked back toward the square's exit. It was already guarded by the knights. Then Cale snapped his fingers toward Rocco's direction. Rocco instantly disappeared from the square. Cale thought to himself, the answer is about to be revealed. The staff arranged for Cale to sit in an empty seat here. Taylor looked over and said, we meet again. Young Master Cale. Cale replied, yes. He looked around at the people, thinking the seating arrangement was just like the banquet. Taylor began to admonish Cale right away, telling him to behave himself. Cale smiled and said, all right, brother. I will not do anything today. Noir suddenly appeared beside Cale and told him there were 15 minutes left until the start. After saying that, Noir flew away. Cale thought to himself that having this little guy around was really convenient. At that moment, amid the cheers of the crowd, members of the royal family of Karo arrived in carriages one after another. Crown Prince Alberu sat at the very front, cheerfully waving to the crowd. Cale thought. Noir had said the Crown Prince's hair and eye color should naturally be brown. Yet in the novel, brown was the most common color on this continent. As the final carriage appeared, a guard shouted, His Majesty King Zed Crossman is entering. As the king entered, the cheers grew even louder. That was when Cale noticed potted plants suddenly appearing on the nearby roof. He thought their efficiency was truly impressive. Since the threat had already been cleared away, the king stepped up to the microphone. Everyone in the audience stopped talking and looked toward him. Of the 5 nations. Suddenly, Ellie and Taylor looked up in surprise, and the surrounding citizens noticed it as well, buzzing with questions about what was happening up above. It turned out that numerous people in black robes had suddenly appeared on the adjacent roof. When the knights spotted them, they shouted to demand who they were and ordered them to come down. Seeing that these intruders had no intention of descending, the knights charged toward the roof. Cale thought to himself that the enemy had finally appeared. He had been worried that things might turn out differently from the original story. At that moment, the bloodthirsty mage laughed wildly and began to cast magic. A bolt of red lightning gathered in his hand, and he hurled the power down toward the crowd below. Fortunately, it did not hit anyone. It simply spun violently on the ground for a moment before vanishing. Everyone focused their minds on searching for any remaining magic bombs. The black dragon told Cale that he found one, and Cale thought to himself, 10 minutes remaining. Even if they could not disarm every magic bomb in time, there was still plenty of time to move them to the mountain behind the capital. After all, they had Noir and Claire with them. Noir told Choi Han that it was on that man. Choi Han grabbed the man by the hand, while the man panicked and shouted at him to let go. He spun the man around and quickly ripped the necklace off his neck. Just then, Ellie suddenly grabbed Cale and asked why he was staring blankly when she had been calling him the whole time. Cale did not hear a word of it, instead looking over toward the Crown Prince. He thought back to how Noir had clearly told him that the Crown Prince dyed his hair. Why had the activation of the magic disruption orb failed to change his hair color? Could it be that his hair color was not changed using magic? At that moment, several members of the mysterious organization activated a magic circle together, summoning numerous magic arrows to rain down on the square. Yet because of the magic disruption orb, it had absolutely no effect. As Noir announced that another one was found, Cale looked at the time as it hit 9:04, realizing they had already found 3. At that moment, the others walked over to Cale one by one and told Cale that this was no time to zone out. They had better hurry up and escape. Cale looked at the panicked group in front of him and pointed behind them, saying, My friend, calm down. The two of them looked toward the plaza exit. The nobles had already rushed. Right over there. Ellie suddenly realized and pushed up his glasses, saying, I am calm. Cale shrugged his shoulders and said, that is more like you. Just then, Choi Han found another bag containing a magic bomb. Cale thought to himself, that is the fourth one. It is now 9:08. There are only 2 minutes left before the magic disruption sphere wears off. After that, the mana capable of detonating the bombs will fly toward them. Cale thought about the time left, finding 2 in 2 minutes. However, as Noir finished finding all the bombs in the plaza, they stood there in utter disbelief. Wait, how can there only be 4 magic bombs? The document clearly stated there were 6 of them. Only 4 magic bombs were found in the square. Cale thought to himself that there were clearly 10 in the novel. Could it be that because he changed the course of the story, the number of bombs decreased as well? Just then, the royal mages began activating a mana stabilization barrier. Right as the barrier was about to be completed, the 4 magic bombs were immediately thrown out. Watching the magic bombs fly toward the back mountain, Cale breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily, Noir and Claire were there to throw them outside the barrier. The moment the mages finished the barrier, a massive explosion immediately occurred in the direction of the back mountain. Even though they were far away and the barrier was active, the power of the explosion still terrified everyone present. The nobles who knew a bit about magic all knew that only magic bombs could have this level of power. Since no more explosions occurred, Cale breathed another sigh of relief. It seemed there really were only 4 bombs in the square. Looking toward the explosion, Noir seemed to have a new realization. He told Cale, we saved them. According to the plan, they would have died. At that moment, the bloodthirsty mage spoke up. What a shame that not a single person was even injured. Why did the bomb explode over there? This is such a headache. To think the carefully laid main plan actually failed. Just then, the king suddenly shouted at the bloodthirsty mage. What are you doing? Who are you? Who on earth are you people? The bloodthirsty mage's words made Cale worried. He thought that since the mage mentioned the main plan failed, there might be a backup plan. The king ordered the knights beside him that these lunatics who committed such evil acts must not be allowed to escape. Then, the bloodthirsty mage suddenly clapped, and 2 men in black carrying bags instantly appeared by his side. Seeing the bags those two were carrying, Cale figured the remaining 2 magic bombs must be inside. Watching the men in black tear open a combustion scroll, Cale realized they intended to take everyone down with them. With a shout from the bloodthirsty mage, go! The suicide bombers quickly rushed toward the area where the nobles were. The nobles in the square were terrified by the scene and began screaming and running in all directions. Ellie and Taylor shouted at Cale, telling Cale to hurry up and leave with them. Right then, Noir in the sky muttered, I am going, and suddenly vanished. Cale thought to himself, it is already too late to run. There is no way to escape the blast radius in just a few seconds. An explosion like this will at worst cost me an arm. But thanks to the vitality of the heart, any blown-off arm can just grow back. These people do not have an ancient power, though. If they lose an arm or a leg, it will never grow back. It looks like the plan needs to change. At that moment, Moore suddenly appeared beside Cale and told him that I brought someone. Claire landed and immediately stepped in front of Cale while starting to cast a defensive barrier. Then the bloodthirsty mage shouted and unleashed a detonation spell toward the 2 assassins. At the same time, Cale reached out toward where the 2 were rushing from, leaving Claire looking at him in confusion. The moment the detonation spell hit the 2 assassins, a silver-white shield suddenly appeared between them, following Noir's cry of I am coming too. Another layer of white barrier was wrapped around the assassins. Seeing Cale use his ancient power, Claire stared in wide-eyed shock. Damn it, I can't hold on much longer. 2 magic bombs exploded violently right in front of them. To protect the people behind him, Cale immediately summoned the indestructible shield the moment the magic bombs detonated. After the intense explosion, the area was left in total shambles. The nobles in the square were all injured to varying degrees. Ellie and the others were stunned by the scene before them. The shield that blocked the explosion was now shattered. Fragments were scattered everywhere. Cale was still shaken by the blast. He hadn't expected those 2 bombs to be so powerful. Suddenly, a wave of intense pain surged through his body, forcing him to drop to his knees. Seeing this, Claire rushed over to ask if Cale was all right. Cale looked down, the stinging pain leaving him feeling shaken. Fortunately, Noir's barrier had reduced the damage to the shield. Otherwise, the pain would have been unbearable. Ellie and the others crowded around to check on him. Cale had just started to say he was fine. Tomato juice burst from his mouth with a cough, and Cale froze for a second. Ellie screamed in panic from the side, crying out about blood. But then, Cale's heart began to beat strongly, instantly stabilizing his body. Cale smiled with satisfaction, feeling that his physical condition had become stronger than ever. The feeling of getting stronger was pretty good. Taylor clenched his fists tightly, surprised that Cale could still laugh right now. He shouted angrily at Cale, telling him not to laugh or force himself to hold on. At that moment, Noir also roared at Cale from the sky, telling the weak human to destroy everything here and die along with it. Cale frowned slightly. Noir's words sounded like the dragon was worried about him, though the murderous intent was a bit too strong. Amiru and Gilbert said they would go find a priest to treat Cale's injuries. Cale felt that getting checked out would not hurt. Although his body no longer hurt, it was probably better to keep pretending to be injured. As Cale shifted his gaze, he noticed Choi Han. Choi Han had a dark expression as he told the knight to move aside. Choi Han stepped closer to the knight and asked who had even coined a term like ordinary people. Cale worried that Choi Han might cause trouble, so he quickly waved his hand to signal him not to come over. Choi Han hesitated for a moment, then looked a bit dejected as he apologized to Cale. Watching Choi Han pick up the red kitten, Cale thought there was really no need for him to apologize. Claire felt that Cale was quite amazing. He had done such an incredible thing, yet remained so relaxed about it. She muttered softly to Cale, "I really do not understand you." Cale suddenly turned serious, leaving Claire momentarily baffled. She suddenly turned her head to look behind her. The bloodthirsty mage smiled and said, "I really did not expect this at all. This is actually quite interesting." Right after saying that, he made a new discovery. It seemed like he had seen the woman before somewhere. Realizing it, the bloodthirsty mage widened his eyes in shock. "Isn't this the red-haired mage from the Blue Wolf tribe village?" He floated in midair and shouted excitedly, "Goodness, what a surprise. I never expected to find so much of my favorite blood color here. I really want to put all of you into my collection cabinet right now." The words of the bloodthirsty mage gave Cale goosebumps. He thought to himself that this character's mental state was truly abnormal. Then he turned his head to look at Choi Han behind him and gave him a nod. At that moment, the king suddenly ordered the soldiers to release their arrows. Instantly, 3 arrows imbued with magic came flying toward the bloodthirsty mage. He stared at the king and let out a cold snort. The king was startled, and then his face filled with anger. The bloodthirsty mage clawed forward. The bloodthirsty mage waved his hand and said, "See you next time." Right after that, the arrows converging on him exploded violently in an instant. As the blast wave swept across, the plaza quickly calmed down. The bloodthirsty mage vanished along with all the figures in black. After his plan failed, the bloodthirsty mage disappeared together with everyone in black. Since it was teleportation, no one present knew where he had gone. However, Cale knew very well because the original novel described the location where he would teleport. He had already sent the 2 little ones there in advance. As long as the mage appeared at the spot mentioned in the book, he would surely die by Choi Han's hand. At that moment, the king stepped back onto the podium. He announced that he would do his utmost to repair the damage from today's tragic attack. He asked everyone to follow the royal family's arrangements and stay calm. The celebration would be postponed. Cale thought to himself that Claire originally did not want to show her face in front of the royalty. Yet she still appeared for his sake, and since the situation was urgent while Noir could not reveal himself, she must have stepped up for that reason. Claire turned her head and found Cale staring at her. She smiled and told Cale that it was a secret. In fact, they had already made a prior agreement before the operation began. Noir and the Beast tribes absolutely could not be exposed. If Choi Han and Claire were noticed, they would just pretend to be passing by. Everyone coordinated to proceed carefully. They tried to minimize unnecessary trouble. At that moment, Amiru hurried over to find Cale with a priest in tow. The priest was out of breath from the rushed journey. He asked Cale how his injuries were doing. Cale held out his hand and told the priest that it hurt so much. He asked the priest to heal him. Cale's injury was extremely minor. The priest gave an awkward smile as he healed the wound on Cale's hand. He chimed in that the silver shield Cale summoned earlier was truly remarkable. He said Cale had done something incredible. "You really did a remarkable thing." Noticing the crown prince walking toward them, Cale smiled and replied, "It looks like this is your first time seeing an ancient power." At that moment, someone reached out and patted Cale on the shoulder. He smiled and said to him, "I see." Cale and the priest quickly bowed to the crown prince. Cale thought to himself, "Since my trump card is already exposed, I need to get every possible benefit out of this. Tangible rewards are much better than empty honors." The crown prince suddenly stepped forward and hugged Cale. Patting him happily, he said, "Young Master Cale, you were amazing." "Thank you," then whispered quietly in his ear, "Young Master, it seems you and I are the same kind of person. Do not go causing any more head-scratching trouble, and I will reward you handsomely. How about that?" Cale felt the crown prince was somewhat. He reached his hand out behind the crown prince. Then they embraced each other. And with a smile, Cale said, "You are far too kind. I simply did what was expected of me." Noir said to Cale, "Something feels a bit strange about the two of you." Cale thought that as expected of a dragon. Even though he was still young, his observational skills were quite good. Cale's reaction made the Crown Prince feel somewhat awkward, and he awkwardly took a few steps back. Shortly afterward, carriages sent by the royal family arrived to pick up everyone in the square. The Crown Prince looked at Cale and said, "Young Master Cale, you should go first. Your performance today was truly admirable." Cale quickly bowed and told the Crown Prince that you are too modest. You are like a guiding star in the hearts of the people. How could I possibly board the carriage before your highness? That would be far too discourteous. Cale's words left Noir with an awkward look on his face, thinking that Cale had never said anything so nauseating before. Someone stepped forward and patted Cale on the shoulder. "I am simply expressing my respect to you, so please do not decline." Cale acted somewhat embarrassed, and smoothly went along with it, saying, "Since that is the case, then this humble person will go first." He turned his head, thinking to himself. Noir seemed to be worried about him. Venient expression seemed to say, "How could that punk possess such power? Damn it, and he is even favored so much by the royal family." Thinking of this, Cale felt rather happy. He walked toward the carriage with a smile. When his gaze swept over Nico, it even gave Nico a good scare. Cale thought, it should be able to reduce one little villain. After Cale got into the carriage, the Crown Prince ordered that the highest etiquette be used to invite the young lady behind them. Hearing the Crown Prince, Cale looked at Claire outside the window. He did not need to worry at all, because Claire was very reliable. The luxury of the royal carriage surprised Cale a bit. Even the leather used for the seats was something he had never seen before. The Crown Prince suddenly spoke up and asked Cale if he wanted treatment. Cale replied, although he was quite healthy, he should still enjoy the best medical team and the care of priests. He wanted to rest in bed for 4 days. Cale, looking so shameless, made the Crown Prince gape in astonishment. The royal family would provide top-tier care to show their gratitude according to the Crown Prince's own wishes. Cale nodded and said that sounded wonderful. Suddenly, the Crown Prince asked with a serious expression, "Young Master Cale, do you have any connection with that person?" Cale thought back to what Noir had said in the plaza earlier. Why would the Crown Prince watch people die without stepping forward when he clearly had the ability? Cale thought to himself, could the Crown Prince be deliberately hiding his strength? Even though his own attendants died, and a knight had his legs and arms blown off, he still pretended to be weak and hid in the back. I actually thought he was a kind person. Even though Cale liked using people, he smiled and asked the Crown Prince, why would I ever do something so troublesome? The prince leaned back in his chair and replied, that is true. He thought about how Cale had always pretended to be an easygoing punk, so doing something like this would only bring him more trouble. The only reason he stepped in just now must have been because he had no other choice. Cale said, my display just now is probably going to draw an investigation from the royal family. I trust you will help me block it, right? The Crown Prince pulled the curtain closed and said,